Hey there, welcome to Broaderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Mirror of fear. Have you ever broken a mirror and felt something ominous stir in the air? I used to think that the idea of bad luck following broken glass was just an old wives' tale, a superstitious remnant from simpler times. But now, after what happened, I can't shake the feeling that there was something to it. Something dark. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday, one of those unremarkable days you forget as soon as it ends. I was in my apartment, tidying up, when my elbow brushed against the edge of the old mirror that hung in the hallway. It fell, crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass filled the room, and I stood frozen, staring at the broken shards scattered across the floor. It was an antique mirror, one I had picked up from a flea market years ago. It had always felt out of place in my modern, minimalist apartment, but something about it had drawn me in that day, its age, its craftsmanship, the way the glass seemed to shimmer with a life of its own. As I knelt to clean up the mess, I saw something strange in the fragments. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure in the reflection, a shadow standing behind me. My heart raced, and I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just my empty hallway, silent and still. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, and continued cleaning. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air in my apartment felt different, heavier, like the walls were closing in on me. I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep, every creak of the floorboards or gust of wind outside making my heart jump. And then it started. The nightmares. At first, they were vague, shapeless dreams, dark corridors, whispers in the shadows, a feeling of being watched. But soon, they became more vivid, more real. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, convinced that something was in the room with me. In the dreams, I saw myself, but older, tired, afraid, running from something I couldn't see. And always, in the background, there was the mirror. Broken, just like in real life, but the reflections within it were wrong. They showed things that hadn't happened yet, terrible things. Death. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just stress, that I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But the dreams only got worse. They began to bleed into my waking life. I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye, flickers of movement, dark figures that would vanish the moment I turned to look at them. I would catch glimpses of myself in the few remaining mirrors in my apartment, and for a brief second, my reflection would move on its own, just a fraction of a second out of sync with me. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my skin crawl. One night, after another sleepless stretch of hours spent pacing my apartment, I decided to take a closer look at the shards of the broken mirror. I hadn't thrown them away, for reasons I couldn't quite explain. They sat in a box in the corner of my bedroom, and every time I looked at it, I felt a strange pull, like the mirror wanted me to examine it again. I emptied the box onto the floor, arranging the pieces as best I could, trying to reassemble the mirror, even though I knew it was pointless. And as I did, the strange feeling intensified. It was like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That's when I saw it again. My reflection, staring back at me from one of the larger shards. But it wasn't me, not exactly. The face was mine, but the eyes were hollow, empty. And in the reflection, behind me, there was something else. A shadow, a figure, standing in the doorway. I turned, my heart in my throat, but once again, there was nothing. Just an empty room. Yet, in the reflection, the figure remained, watching. The next few days were a blur of fear and confusion. I became obsessed with the mirror. I couldn't leave it alone. Every time I looked into one of the pieces, I saw more glimpses of the future, more images of my own death. I saw accidents that hadn't yet happened, injuries that I had never sustained, but the most terrifying part was that they all felt inevitable. Like I was being shown my fate, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I started avoiding mirrors altogether. I covered them up, threw them out, but no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching me, following me. I stopped leaving the apartment. I couldn't. Every time I stepped outside, the world felt wrong, like I was being pushed towards something dark, something final. It was on the 5th night that things reached their peak. I hadn't slept in days. My mind felt like it was unraveling, frayed at the edges, consumed by fear and paranoia. I could barely tell the difference between dream and reality anymore. The shadows in my apartment seemed to move on their own, twisting and curling around the corners of my vision. Every sound was amplified, every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps sneaking up behind me. I tried to distract myself, to break free from whatever was happening, but nothing worked. The weight of dread was suffocating, a constant pressure in my chest. The images from the mirror haunted me, playing over and over in my mind, scenes of my death, of something chasing me through darkened streets, catching up to me just as I stumbled and fell. The last thing I would always see in those moments was my own face, reflected in the broken mirror, twisted in terror, just before everything went black. I stopped looking into mirrors entirely. Even the smallest glimpse of my own reflection would send a chill down my spine, as if I were staring at someone else. Someone doomed. But the 5th night was different. It started like the others, with me pacing around the apartment, jumping at every little noise. But as the hours dragged on, I noticed something strange. Everything was silent. Not just quiet, but deathly still. No hum of the refrigerator, no distant sounds of cars from the street below. Just pure, unnatural silence. I froze in place, my pulse quickening. Something was wrong. And then, the temperature in the room dropped. It was sudden, like all the warmth had been sucked out of the air. My breath came out in invisible puffs, and goosebumps crawled across my skin. I knew, deep down, that whatever had been haunting me, whatever had been watching me, was finally here. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room. And there, in the corner, where the box of broken mirror shards had been left, I saw it, a dark figure, standing perfectly still, its form barely visible in the dim light. It was tall, its outline shifting and flickering like a shadow cast by a dying flame. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was as though the air had turned to ice, freezing me in place. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching. And then, it took a step forward. My instincts kicked in, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt sluggish, like I was moving through water. Every step I took away from the figure, it took one closer. Slowly, deliberately, it closed the distance between us, and with each step, the room seemed to grow darker, the shadows swallowing up the light. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced, but there was no way out. The door to the apartment was too far, and the figure was between me and the exit. I was trapped. And then I made the mistake of looking into the mirror shards on the floor. In the reflection, I saw what was really happening. The figure wasn't just a shadow. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. My own face stared back at me from the mirror, twisted and distorted, eyes hollow and lifeless, just as I had seen in my nightmares. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The reflection grinned, a cold, unnatural smile that sent a shiver down my spine. And then, without warning, it lunged at me. I fell backward, hitting the floor hard, but when I looked up, the figure was gone. The apartment was empty again, silent and still, as if nothing had ever been there. But the feeling of dread remained, heavier than ever. I knew that this wasn't over. Whatever was haunting me wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. And I knew, deep down, that it wanted me. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, that I was losing my grip on reality, but the evidence was all around me. The broken mirror, the nightmares, the strange figure, none of it made sense, but I couldn't deny what I had seen. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just sat in the corner of my apartment, my eyes fixed on the door, waiting for whatever was coming next. I didn't have to wait long. By dawn, I had convinced myself that the worst was over. The figure hadn't returned, and the apartment had remained silent. But the uneasy feeling lingered, a knot of anxiety in my chest that I couldn't shake. I hadn't slept a wink, and my body felt like it was running on fumes. My thoughts were scattered, blurry, and all I wanted was for this nightmare to end. I made myself a cup of coffee, though I could barely lift the mug to my lips. My hands were shaking, my nerves frayed. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the walls, I realized I needed help. Whatever was happening to me, whether it was real or some kind of psychological break, I couldn't handle it on my own anymore. I decided to call my friend, Lisa. She was the kind of person who was always calm in a crisis, level-headed and practical. If anyone could help me make sense of what was happening, it was her. The phone rang a few times before she answered, her voice groggy. "Hey, what's up?" "It's early." I hesitated. How could I explain this without sounding crazy? I settled for the basics. "Lisa, I need to talk to you. Something weird is going on, and I don't know how to explain it over the phone. Can you come over?" There was a pause on the other end. "Weird how? Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't think I am." That seemed to do the trick. "All right, I'll be there in a bit," she said. "Just hang tight." While I waited for her to arrive, I paced the apartment, my eyes darting toward every shadow, every corner. I kept expecting the figure to return, to materialize out of the darkness and finish what it had started. But the apartment remained eerily calm, almost mocking in its normalcy. While I waited for her to arrive, I paced the apartment, my eyes darting toward every shadow, every corner. I kept expecting the figure to return, to materialize out of the darkness and finish what it had started. But the apartment remained eerily calm, almost mocking in its normalcy. An hour later, there was a knock at the door, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I rushed to open it, and there she was, Lisa, standing in the hallway, looking concerned but composed. Just seeing her there, a familiar and friendly face, gave me a brief moment of relief. "Hey," she said, stepping inside and giving me a quick once-over. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I might have," I muttered, closing the door behind her. We sat down in the living room, and I tried to explain everything. The broken mirror, the strange reflections, the figure that had been haunting me. As I talked, her expression shifted from concern to something closer to disbelief, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, there was a long silence. Lisa leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Okay," she said slowly. "So, you're telling me that you think the broken mirror is showing you what? The future? Your own death?" I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. "I know how it sounds, but I'm not imagining this. It feels real. The dreams, the reflections, it's like something is trying to tell me something. Or warn me." Lisa nodded thoughtfully, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. "Look, I believe that you're scared. But maybe it's not the mirror. Maybe it's something else, stress, anxiety. You've been through a lot lately, right? Work, personal stuff, it's all piling up." I wanted to argue, to tell her that it wasn't just stress, but before I could say anything, she stood up and walked over to the box of broken mirror shards. She crouched down, inspecting them carefully. "They're just pieces of glass," she said, picking up one of the larger shards and holding it up to the light. "Nothing supernatural about that." I opened my mouth to respond, but then something strange happened. Lisa's face, reflected in the shard, shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it, the same distortion I had seen in my own reflection. Her eyes darkened, her smile twisted into something grotesque, and then, just as quickly, it was gone. I gasped, stepping back. Lisa looked up at me, confused. "What? What is it?" I shook my head, trying to clear the image from my mind. "Nothing," I muttered, my voice shaky. "It's nothing." But I knew it wasn't nothing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just in my head. And now, I feared it might not just be after me. I tried to calm my racing thoughts, but I couldn't shake the image of Lisa's distorted reflection. It had only lasted a second, but that was enough. Something was wrong, and now I wasn't sure if I could protect her or myself. Lisa put the shard back into the box and stood up, brushing her hands off on her jeans. "Look, I get that you're freaked out, but I don't see anything weird about this mirror. Maybe it's just in your head. You haven't been sleeping, right? That can mess with your perception." I nodded, but I wasn't entirely convinced. "Yeah, maybe." But my voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. Lisa noticed, too. She softened, taking a step closer and placing a hand on my shoulder. "How about this? Why don't you stay at my place for a few days? Get out of here, get some rest. You can clear your mind. Maybe all this will seem a little less intense after a break." It was a tempting offer. The apartment felt claustrophobic, filled with an oppressive weight that pressed down on me. Maybe a change of scenery would help. Maybe the distance would break the strange hold this mirror had over me. I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, okay. That sounds like a good idea." "Great." Lisa gave me an encouraging pat on the back. "Pack a bag and we'll head out." I went into the bedroom to gather a few things, trying to push down the unease bubbling up inside me. I packed quickly, grabbing clothes and toiletries, but every time I passed a box of mirror shards in the corner, I felt a pull. It was like the mirror was calling me, whispering my name in the back of my mind. When I finally zipped up my bag, I paused at the door, casting one last glance at the box. I told myself to leave it, to walk away and never look back. But something inside me wouldn't let go. Without thinking, I walked over and picked up one of the larger shards, slipping it into my pocket. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I could figure out what was happening if I took a piece with me. Or maybe the mirror wasn't done with me yet. Either way, I couldn't resist. When I rejoined Lisa in the living room, she was already by the door, keys in hand. Ready? I nodded, trying to hide the nervous energy buzzing under my skin. Yeah. Let's go. We left the apartment and headed for Lisa's place. As we drove, I stared out the window, watching the city pass by in a blur of lights and shadows. I kept telling myself that once we reached her apartment, everything would feel normal again. That I would be safe. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The mirror had shown me too much already. It had shown me things I couldn't unsee, things that felt like they were still waiting for me. When we finally pulled up to her building, I felt a brief flicker of relief. Her apartment was bright, cozy, and familiar. It was the kind of place that should have made me feel safe. But as soon as I stepped inside, that same cold dread settled over me again. It was as if the shadows had followed me, creeping into every corner of the room. Lisa tried to make things feel normal. She ordered takeout, put on a movie, and we spent the evening talking about anything but the mirror. I tried to relax, to convince myself that it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. That it had followed me here. That night, I lay awake in Lisa's guest room, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the fridge or the distant sound of cars passing on the street below. But even in the quiet, I couldn't relax. My mind kept drifting back to the shard of the mirror in my pocket, tucked away in my bag. I hadn't told Lisa I brought it with me. Somehow, I knew she wouldn't understand. I tossed and turned for hours, the weight of the mirror shard pressing against me like a dark secret. And then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard something. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. My name. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. The room was dark, shadows shifting in the corners. But the whisper came again, louder this time, and unmistakably clear. Come look. I knew what it wanted. It wanted me to look at the shard. To see what it had to show me next. Terrified but unable to resist, I slipped out of bed and quietly unzipped my bag. I pulled out the shard, its cold surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through the window. I stared into it, bracing myself for whatever horror it would reveal. At first, all I saw was my own reflection, pale and exhausted. But then, slowly, the image began to change. My reflection shifted, distorting in the same way it had in my apartment. My eyes darkened, my face twisted into a grotesque grin, and behind me, in the reflection, a figure stood in the doorway. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, but the doorway was empty. No figure. No shadow. Just the silent, darkened room. My hands were trembling as I looked back down at the shard. The distorted reflection was gone, replaced by my normal, terrified face. But the image of the figure standing behind me lingered in my mind, as vivid as if it had been real. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this room, holding this cursed shard of glass that seemed to have a life of its own. I needed to get rid of it. Now. Grabbing the shard tightly, I rushed out of the guest room and into the hallway, heading for the kitchen. My breathing was shallow, and every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet made me flinch. The house felt too quiet, too still. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, as if something unseen was watching me from the shadows. Once in the kitchen, I frantically searched for something, anything, that could break the shard for good. My eyes landed on a metal hammer resting on the counter, likely something Lisa had left out after doing some repairs. Perfect. I snatched the hammer and placed the shard on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I hesitated, staring at the piece of glass as if it were alive. There was a part of me, deep down, that didn't want to destroy it. A voice whispered in my mind, telling me that the mirror held answers, that it could show me the future, help me avoid whatever fate it was warning me about. But I couldn't trust it. The things it showed me were not warnings, they were nightmares. Taking a deep breath, I lifted the hammer and brought it down hard on the shard. The sound was deafening. The shard shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, scattering across the counter and the floor. For a brief second, I felt a surge of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. But then, the temperature in the room plummeted. The sudden chill was so intense that I could see my breath fogging up in front of me. The air felt heavy, thick with an unseen presence. And then I heard it, a soft, barely audible whisper coming from all around me. It wasn't just one voice. It was many. Dozens, maybe more, all whispering at once, overlapping each other, their words indecipherable but filled with malice. I backed away from the counter, my heart racing. The voices grew louder, more insistent, filling the room like a swarm of angry bees. I covered my ears, trying to block out the sound, but it didn't help. The whispers were inside my head now, crawling through my thoughts like insects. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet, and then... silence. The voices stopped as abruptly as they had begun, leaving the room eerily still. I lowered my hands from my ears, my heart still pounding in my chest, and skimmed the room. The shards of the mirror were still scattered across the floor, but the oppressive feeling was gone. It was like the room had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. For a brief moment, I dared to hope that it was over. But then, from the doorway, I heard Lisa's voice. "What are you doing in here?" I turned to look at her, but something was wrong. She stood in the doorway, just as the figurehead in my reflection, her face hidden in shadow. She stepped forward, into the dim light of the kitchen, and I felt a jolt of cold terror run through me. Her eyes. They weren't her eyes. They were hollow, empty, like black pits staring straight through me. Her face twisted into a grotesque, unnatural grin, the same one I had seen in the reflection. "Lisa?" My voice came out as a whisper, barely audible. She didn't respond. She just stood there, grinning, her head tilted slightly to one side as if she were waiting for something. I took a step back, my legs trembling beneath me. "Lisa, what's going on?" She took a step forward, the grin widening. "You shouldn't have looked." Her voice was wrong, distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't Lisa. This was something else, something wearing her face like a mask. I turned and bolted for the door, but before I could reach it, the kitchen lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. And then, from the shadows behind me, I heard a soft, malevolent whisper. "Too late." The darkness swallowed me whole. I could barely see a foot in front of me, and every breath I took felt thick and heavy, as if the air itself had turned to sludge. The whisper, that voice, Lisa's but not Lisa's, echoed in my head, sending shivers down my spine. Too late, it had said. Too late for what? I stumbled forward blindly, groping for the door, but the room seemed to shift around me. I could feel the cold metal of the doorknob under my fingertips, but when I tried to turn it, it wouldn't budge. The door was stuck, locked, or maybe the house itself was keeping me here. Panic surged in my chest as I tugged harder, my fingers slipping on the metal. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of footsteps, slow and deliberate. My breath caught, and I froze in place, not daring to look back. I knew I would see if I turned around, Lisa, or whatever was wearing her skin, standing there, grinning at me with those hollow eyes. Waiting. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right behind me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up from this nightmare. It had to be a dream. It couldn't be real. Then, I felt it, a hand on my shoulder. Cold, icy, and wrong. I screamed and jerked away, spinning around to face whatever it was, but the room was empty. No Lisa. No shadowy figure. Just darkness and silence. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. But there was no sense to be found. Nothing about this was logical. Nothing about this was real. Or was it? As I backed away from the door, my eyes finally adjusted to the dim light filtering through the kitchen window. The moon cast a pale glow on the shattered pieces of the mirror still scattered across the floor. I stared at them, feeling an inexplicable pull, like they were calling to me. The mirror. It had started everything. It had shown me the future, or some twisted version of it, and now I was trapped in its game. But what if there was a way to stop it? What if I could figure out what it wanted, what it was trying to show me? Maybe, just maybe, I could break the cycle before it was too late. With shaky hands, I bent down and picked up one of the larger shards, careful not to cut myself on its jagged edges. As I stared into it, the kitchen around me seemed to fade away, replaced by swirling shadows. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't quite right. My face was too pale, my eyes too wide, filled with fear. Behind me, in the reflection, I saw the dark figure again, standing in the doorway. But this time, it wasn't Lisa. It was me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The figure, the thing haunting me, wasn't some external entity. It was me. My future, twisted and distorted by whatever force the mirror had unleashed. It wasn't just showing me visions of death, it was showing me my death. The shards slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as the weight of it all pressed down on me. I was running from myself, from my own fate, and there was no escaping it. Behind me, the footsteps returned, slow and deliberate, echoing through the empty room. I didn't turn around this time. I didn't need to. I knew who was there. It was me. The sound of those footsteps was unbearable, like the steady ticking of a clock counting down the moments I had left. My body felt frozen in place, locked in the middle of the kitchen, as though I were being held by some invisible force. Every nerve screamed at me to run, to move, to do something, but I couldn't. The terror that washed over me was paralyzing, sinking its claws into my mind. I forced myself to breathe. Slowly. Deeply. My breath echoed in the silent room, but I could still hear the footsteps. Closer now. The thing behind me, was almost upon me. In a sudden burst of adrenaline, I darted forward, leaping away from the cold pull of the mirror shards scattered on the floor. The room tilted, and I crashed into the counter, my hand knocking over a cup, which shattered loudly on the ground. I winced, but I couldn't afford to stop. The only thought in my head was escape. I ran for the hallway, every instinct telling me to get out of the apartment, to leave it all behind. But as I reached the front door, something deep inside me told me it was futile. The image in the mirror had been clear. This wasn't just about my apartment or even the mirror itself. It was about me. And no matter where I went, I couldn't escape myself. Still, I had to try. My fingers fumbled with the lock, but just as I turned the knob, the door slammed shut on its own, throwing me back. I hit the floor hard, gasping for breath as the icy coldness of the apartment crept over me again. It felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating me with their silent malevolence. Then, from behind me, I heard the voice. My voice. But not mine. You can't run from this. I scrambled to my feet, whirling around to face the shadowy figure that had followed me out of the kitchen. There it stood, a twisted version of myself, my face, my body, but wrong in every way. Hollow eyes, a sinister smile, and a dark, looming presence that made my skin crawl. What do you want from me? I screamed, my voice cracking with fear. The thing tilted its head, mimicking the same motion Lisa had made earlier. It's not about what I want. It's about what you already know. I shook my head, backing away slowly, my mind struggling to make sense of the cryptic words. I don't know anything. I don't understand. The figure stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate, like it was savoring my fear. You've already seen it. You've seen what's coming. You just don't want to accept it. My back hit the wall, and I realized I had nowhere left to go. The figure was standing directly in front of me now, its face inches from mine. I could feel the cold radiating off it, seeping into my bones. Its eyes, my eyes, bored into me with a terrifying intensity. And then, as I stared into those empty, black eyes, the truth hit me with a force that nearly knocked me over. The visions. The mirror. The figure. It was me, but not just any version of me. It was the me I would become if I gave in to the fear. If I let it consume me. The mirror hadn't just shown me the future, it had shown me the path I was on. A path that led straight to my own destruction. The figure leaned in closer, its voice a chilling whisper. You can't fight what's inside you. For a moment, I felt completely hopeless. How could I fight something that was a part of me? How could I escape my own mind, my own fear? But then, something shifted inside me. A spark of defiance. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not going to let this happen. The figure's smile faltered. You have no choice. I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline surge through me again. I do have a choice. I'm not going to let you win. Without thinking, I lunged forward, pushing past the shadowy version of myself and sprinting toward the bedroom. I didn't know what I was looking for, but something inside me told me the answer lay with the mirror shards. If I was going to stop me, then I had to confront the source. I skidded into the room, eyes darting around until they landed on the fragments of the mirror still in my bag. I grabbed the largest piece and held it up, staring into it. My reflection was normal again, just me, breathing heavily, wild-eyed and desperate. But then, behind me, I saw the figure again, creeping closer, its hand reaching out. I turned to face it, holding the shard up like a weapon. "Get away from me!" I shouted, but my voice shook with fear. The figure stopped, its eyes narrowing. For the first time, it looked uncertain. I didn't know if I could destroy it, but I had to try. With a surge of anger, I lifted the shard higher and brought it down hard against the figure's chest. The glass didn't pierce it. Instead, the moment the shard made contact, the figure shattered, just like the mirror had. It broke into a million pieces, dissolving into shadows that evaporated into the air, leaving me standing alone in the dark. I stared at the empty space where the figure had stood, my hands trembling. It was gone. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't the end. I might have broken the figure, but the fear was still there, lurking inside me, waiting for its chance to resurface. And the mirror had shown me too much already. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my heart still racing, the broken shard clutched tightly in my hand. The air around me seemed lighter now, the oppressive weight that had filled the apartment finally lifting. But even in the silence, I could still feel the tension humming in the back of my mind, a nagging feeling that this wasn't over. I carefully placed the shard on the bed, staring at it as if it could suddenly spring to life again. It was just a piece of glass now, cold and lifeless, but what it had shown me felt far too real. My reflection. The thing that had taken on my form. It was as if I'd been staring into a twisted version of my own soul. I rubbed my temples, trying to think. What had the figure meant? "You've already seen it," it had said. Seen what? My own death? Some dark, inevitable end that the mirror had revealed to me? I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, whatever the mirror had unleashed, it was far from finished. The visions, the whispers, the figure, they were all warning signs. But of what? I needed answers. I couldn't just sit here and wait for something else to happen. Suddenly, the shrill sound of my phone ringing cut through the quiet. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat. I fumbled for my phone, checking the caller ID. It was Lisa. For a moment, I hesitated. Lisa. I hadn't seen her since this whole nightmare began. She'd been out when I broke the mirror, and after that, everything had spiraled out of control. What if it wasn't really her? What if that figure in the kitchen had been some kind of warning, a twisted version of her? But I couldn't ignore it. I needed to hear her voice, to know she was okay. I answered the call, my hand shaking slightly. Hello? There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then, finally, her voice. Hey, are you okay? You sound off. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was her. The real Lisa. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Yeah, I'm fine, I lied, glancing back at the mirror shard on the bed. Where are you? I'm heading back now. I tried calling earlier, but your phone kept going to voicemail. Is everything all right? No. Nothing was all right. But I couldn't tell her that, not over the phone. Not when I didn't even understand what was happening myself. I'll explain when you get here, I said quickly. Just hurry, okay? She must have heard the urgency in my voice, because her tone shifted. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just hang tight. As soon as the call ended, I felt the silence close in around me again. 10 minutes. I could survive 10 more minutes, couldn't I? I had to. But as I stood there, staring at the mirror shard on the bed, the doubt crept in. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I didn't know what else the mirror would show. My eyes drifted back to the shattered glass. It had to hold some kind of clue, some answer to the terror that had taken hold of my life. It had shown me visions of death, of something darker than I'd ever imagined. If I could understand what it wanted, maybe I could stop it. Maybe I could change whatever fate it had shown me. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I was ready for that answer. I reached out and picked up the shard again, turning it over in my hands. It caught the dim light in the room, reflecting my face in fragments. I looked into it, half expecting to see the twisted version of myself appear once more. But this time, all I saw was my own weary face, exhausted and scared. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe it was over. Maybe destroying the figure had broken the mirror's hold on me. Just as I began to lower the shard, something caught my eye. In the reflection, just behind me, I saw a flash of movement, a shadow, quick and fleeting, darting across the room. My stomach dropped. I whipped around, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was nothing there. The room was empty. I turned back to the mirror shard, my hands trembling now. I stared at it, waiting, my breath shallow. And then, slowly, the reflection began to change. My face faded, replaced by something else, something darker, something worse. A pair of hollow, black eyes stared back at me from the shard. And this time, they weren't mine. I dropped the shard as if it had burned me. It fell to the floor with a sharp clink, and for a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. My breath came in ragged gasps, my mind racing to process what I'd just seen. The black, hollow eyes, they weren't mine, but they were looking through me, as if searching for something. No, this couldn't be happening. I had destroyed the figure, I had fought back, so why was this still happening? Why hadn't it stopped? I backed away from the bed, feeling the cold press of dread creeping back into the room. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I stumbled toward the door, desperate to get away from the mirror, from the shard, from whatever darkness it had unleashed. The apartment suddenly felt like a prison, the walls closing in, the air thick with something unseen. I had to get out. I couldn't stay here, not when I knew that thing, whatever it was still watching. I reached the door and yanked it open, practically flying out into the hallway. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I barely registered the fact that I was still barefoot, still shaking. I just needed to be away from that room, from that cursed mirror. But as I ran down the hall, something stopped me dead in my tracks. The elevator at the end of the corridor opened, and Lisa stepped out. Relief surged through me. There she was, my best friend, safe and sound, looking confused as she saw me standing there in a panic. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "You sounded freaked out on the phone." I opened my mouth to speak, to warn her, to tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood there, frozen, staring at her. Because behind her, just inside the elevator, I saw it. That figure. Me. Or some version of me. Standing in the shadows, watching us. Lisa turned, following my gaze. "What are you looking at?" she asked, glancing back at the elevator. But she didn't see it. She couldn't see it. The figure's eyes, my hollow, black eyes, bored into me, and I felt a sickening wave of dread wash over me. It hadn't gone away. It had just been waiting, watching. And now, it was back. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Lisa, we need to leave." She frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. What are you talking about?" Now! I shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her back toward my apartment. My heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I couldn't let it take her. I couldn't let it take me. But as I pulled Lisa into the apartment, slamming the door behind us, I knew deep down that it was already too late. I could feel the weight of the figure's presence pressing against the walls, against my mind. It was here, in the room with us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lisa stared at me, wide-eyed and alarmed. "You're scaring me. What's going on?" I paced the room, my mind spinning out of control. "It's the mirror," I blurted out. "I broke it, and now it's showing me things. Things that are going to happen. Or maybe they've already happened. I don't know. But it's me. There's something wrong, Lisa, and I can't stop it." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but there was something in her eyes, fear. She didn't understand what I was saying, but she could see how terrified I was. "Okay," she said slowly, her voice steady. "Just calm down. Let's think about this." "What do you mean, the mirror? What did you see?" I pointed toward the bedroom, toward the shards still lying on the floor. It showed me a version of me. And I think it's going to kill me." Lisa's face paled. "You've had a nightmare, that's all," she said, though her voice wavered. "You're not making sense. There's no one else here." But I wasn't listening. My mind was spiraling, the dread creeping up on me, pulling me under. I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. And it was here. The door to the bedroom creaked open, and I turned slowly to face it. I didn't need to see it to know it was standing there, waiting. The door creaked open, the slow, deliberate sound making my skin crawl. Lisa took a step back, her eyes darting between me and the now open doorway. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My body was locked in place by the sheer terror of what I knew was coming. "It's here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Lisa shook her head, panic rising in her expression. "What are you talking about? What's here?" I wanted to answer her, to explain the thing that had taken on my form, the hollow-eyed reflection that had been stalking me ever since the mirror broke. But how could I? None of it made sense. It was madness. Yet it was real, so horrifyingly real. Before I could say another word, a cold gust of air rushed through the apartment, like the sudden onset of a winter storm. Lisa shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling now. I knew what it was. It was the figure. "I told you," I said, taking a shaky step toward her. "It's the mirror. It's coming for me." Lisa took a hesitant step back, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're not making any sense. There's nothing." Her words died in her throat as the air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on us like a weight. And then, from the shadows of the open doorway, the figure stepped forward. It was me again. But not quite. The same hollow eyes, the same twisted smile, the same cold aura that made the air feel like ice. It stood there, silent and still, watching us. Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't answer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I wanted to run, to drag Lisa out of the apartment, but I knew it wouldn't work. This thing, me, it wasn't going to let me go. The figure took a slow step toward us, its eyes fixed on me. It didn't speak. It didn't have to. I knew what it wanted. "I'm not going with you," I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. The figure stopped, its head tilting slightly to one side, just like it had before. And then, in a voice that sounded like mine, but twisted and hollow, it spoke. "You don't have a choice." The words sent a chill down my spine. I backed away, my legs shaking, as the figure took another step closer. Lisa grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "We have to get out of here," she hissed, her voice filled with urgency. "Now!" I nodded, my mind racing, but the figure was already moving, its movements slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. It was playing with us, savoring the fear. Lisa reached for the doorknob, yanking it open, but before we could step out, the door slammed shut on its own with a deafening crash. She let out a small scream, her hands trembling as she tried the knob again. It wouldn't budge. We were trapped. "No," I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. "No, no, no." I turned to face the figure again, my mind scrambling for a way out. But there was nothing. Nothing I could do. It was already too close, its hollow eyes boring into mine, stripping away any sense of hope I had left. "You've already seen the end," it whispered, its voice cold and empty. "You know what happens next." "No!" I shouted, backing away until I hit the wall. "This can't be happening." Lisa was beside me, her breathing ragged, her eyes wide with fear. "What is that thing? What does it want?" "It wants me," I whispered, feeling the weight of the words settle over me like a lead blanket. It's me." Lisa stared at me, her face pale and drawn. "What do you mean, it's you?" I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. I saw it in the mirror. It's who I'm going to become, if I let the fear take over." Lisa shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. "That's insane. This is insane." But I knew it wasn't. I had seen the future, or at least a version of it. The figure was my reflection, twisted by fear and darkness. It was the part of me that I had tried to bury, the part one had tried to ignore. And now, it was standing in front of me, ready to claim what it believed was rightfully its. I had no idea how to stop it. Or if I even could. "Listen to me," I said, urgency pushing my words faster. "We need to figure out a way to escape. It's not just a trick of the mind, this thing is real, and it's tied to the mirror." The figure took another step forward, and the chill in the air intensified, wrapping around us like a vice. I could feel it pulling at my sanity, threatening to drag me under. "What if it's all in your head?" Lisa suggested desperately, glancing from me to the figure, her voice shaky. "You just need to fight it. You're stronger than this." I wanted to believe her, to find strength in her words. But deep down, I could feel the doubt creeping in. The figure smiled, an expression so eerily familiar that it sent a shiver down my spine. It was a smile that promised both knowledge and despair. "No, I'm not letting it win," I shouted, my voice breaking with the effort. "We can't let it take control." The figure paused, its hollow eyes narrowing as if contemplating my defiance. For a moment, the air felt still, heavy with tension. Then, in a voice that echoed around the room, it spoke again. "You are nothing without me." The words sent a jolt of fear through me. The truth in its voice was suffocating. I had spent so long running from my own fears, hiding from my past mistakes, but now I was confronted with the reality of who I was becoming. I turned to Lisa, desperation in my eyes. We need to break the connection. If the mirror is the source of this thing, then we have to destroy it. But how? She asked, her voice shaking. You said you broke it already. I just broke a shard, I exclaimed, pacing back and forth. There might be something more. It's not just about breaking glass. We need to destroy whatever dark energy it holds. The figure laughed softly, a haunting sound that echoed through the room. You cannot escape your fate, brother. I flinched at the word. Brother? It was almost like it knew me, knew my secrets. And yet, I felt so utterly alone. Stop calling me that, I shouted, shaking my head. You're not me. I am you. The figure took another step forward, and I felt the air grow heavier with dread. You can deny it all you want, but the darkness within you is as much a part of you as the light. And it is here to stay. I turned to Lisa, seeing the worry etched in her face. We have to get to the mirror, I said, determination flooding through me. We have to confront whatever is there. Lisa nodded, her expression shifting from fear to resolve. Okay, let's do this. Together. With a deep breath, I turned back toward the bedroom. The figure stood waiting, its hollow eyes watching our every move, but I couldn't let it intimidate me any longer. I was done running. We stepped toward the doorway, and as we moved, I could feel the air shift. The figure mirrored our movements, staying right behind us. Its presence was suffocating, a constant reminder of my fears. I hesitated just outside the bedroom door, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on my chest. We have to be ready, I warned Lisa. Whatever we face, we can't let it take us. She squeezed my hand, her grip steady. I'm with you. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. With one final breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bedroom felt different now, charged with a dark energy that twisted the air. The shard of the mirror lay on the floor, glinting ominously in the low light. As I stepped closer, I could see that the figure had followed us, standing just at the edge of the doorway, its presence filling the space with dread. I fought against the urge to turn back. I wouldn't let it win. Stay back, I shouted, my voice ringing through the room. You don't have any power over us. The figure's smile widened, revealing a darkness that seemed to pulse and writhe. You're wrong. You are nothing without me. But I refused to listen. I knelt down to pick up the mirror shard, feeling the cold glass press against my palm. The moment I touched it, the air around us shifted again, and I was hit by a wave of emotions, fear, anger, and an overwhelming sense of despair. I gasped, clutching the shard tightly. Images flooded my mind, memories I had buried deep. Each memory was tied to the figure before me, dark moments of shame and regret. And suddenly, I understood. The mirror didn't just reflect my fear, it showed the truth of who I was, all the parts of me I wanted to forget. With that realization, something shifted within me. I straightened up, looking directly into the eyes of the figure. You're not stronger than me. It laughed, the sound echoing through the room. We'll see about that. With renewed determination, I turned to the mirror shard in my hand, focusing on my intent. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I shouted. You don't control me. As I said the words, the shard began to glow, a brilliant light illuminating the room. I could feel the dark energy pulsating around us, trying to draw me in, but I pushed against it with everything I had. "You are nothing," the figure screamed, but I could hear the fear in its voice now. "I am everything," I shouted back, raising the shard above my head. With one powerful swing, I brought it crashing down against the floor. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard catching the light and reflecting it throughout the room. The figure screamed, a high-pitched wail that pierced the air as the darkness around it began to dissipate. I felt a rush of energy surge through me, filling the void that had been left by fear. But the figure wasn't finished. As the last remnants of darkness began to fade, it reached out toward me, its cold hand brushing against my cheek. I felt a chill seep into my skin, a final attempt to pull me back into the shadows. "You can't escape me," it hissed, its voice fading as the light grew stronger. But I stood firm, staring directly into those hollow eyes. "You don't own me." With a final burst of light, the figure dissolved, its scream echoing into silence. The moment the figure vanished, the light enveloped the room, washing over me in a warm glow. It felt as if the darkness had lifted, leaving behind a silence so profound I could hear the beating of my own heart. I stood there, the shard of the mirror still clutched tightly in my hand, now surrounded by a halo of shattered glass. The weight of the world seemed to lift off my shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe. But the silence was quickly interrupted by a soft voice behind me. "Is it over?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to find her staring at me, wide-eyed and trembling. "Did you do it?" I glanced back at the remnants of the mirror, the pieces scattered across the floor, reflecting the light like a million tiny stars. "I think so," I replied, trying to catch my breath. "I think it's gone." Lisa stepped closer, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "Are you sure? What if it comes back?" "I don't know," I admitted, shaking my head. "But I feel different. Like I've broken a cycle, or maybe finally accepted a part of myself that I had been hiding from." She nodded slowly, processing my words. "Do you think it could come back?" I looked around the room, still sensing the remnants of darkness lingering in the corners. "Maybe. But I won't let it control me again." With a heavy sigh, I sank to the floor, the weight of the ordeal crashing down around me. The adrenaline that had fueled me moments before began to fade, replaced by exhaustion. I felt drained, both physically and emotionally. Lisa knelt beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You did great. Seriously. I can't believe you faced it like that." "I don't know if I faced it," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I just reacted. I didn't want to be afraid anymore." "That's still really brave," she said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I murmured, glancing at the broken shards scattered around. But what now? What if the mirror was just a symptom of something bigger? I can't keep running from my fears. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. Maybe it's not just about breaking the mirror. Maybe it's about facing what it represented. You've got to confront those feelings and memories. Otherwise, they'll keep coming back. I knew she was right. The figure hadn't just been a monster, it had embodied my regrets and fears. It had fed off my weaknesses, waiting for the moment I would let it take control. "Do you think it's safe to go out?" I asked, glancing at the door. "What if the darkness is still out there?" Lisa looked at me seriously. "We should check. But we need to stick together. You've faced the worst of it. Now it's time to reclaim your life." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. Okay, let's do this. We stood up together, and I picked up a few pieces of the mirror, the shards glinting in the light. I couldn't leave them behind. Each shard felt like a reminder of the battle I had just fought. They symbolized both my fear and my strength. As we approached the door, I glanced back at the remnants of the mirror, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. I had faced my fears, but the journey wasn't over. The echoes of my past would linger, but now I had the strength to confront them. Lisa opened the door cautiously, peering out into the hallway. The air felt different now, lighter, almost electric. "Looks clear," she said, stepping out into the corridor. I followed closely behind, my heart pounding in my chest. We walked slowly, listening intently for any signs of danger. The apartment complex was eerily quiet, but it felt like the calm after a storm, a fragile piece that could shatter at any moment. As we made our way to the staircase, I glanced at Lisa, my mind racing with thoughts. What if it really was just a manifestation of my fears? What if breaking the mirror didn't change anything? Lisa paused, looking at me with a reassuring smile. "You changed, though. You faced something that terrified you. That's more than just breaking a mirror. It's about reclaiming your strength." Her words warmed me, giving me a newfound sense of purpose. We continued down the stairs, and as we reached the ground floor, I felt a shift in the air. It was as if the darkness had receded, leaving behind a sense of hope. But that hope was quickly extinguished as we stepped into the lobby. A familiar presence washed over me, and I felt the chill crawl up my spine. The air grew cold, and my heart dropped as I spotted the elevator doors. They were closed, but the faint sound of laughter echoed from behind them, deep, mocking laughter that sent chills racing down my spine. "What's wrong?" Lisa asked, sensing my hesitation. "That laugh," I whispered, my heart pounding. "It sounds just like..." Before I could finish my sentence, the elevator doors opened with a mechanical hiss. And there it was, the figure, standing in the shadows of the elevator, a twisted version of myself, grinning with that same hollow smile. The laughter echoed through the lobby, filling the air with an icy dread. "You thought you could escape me?" it taunted, stepping forward, its presence suffocating the room. "No!" I shouted, feeling the fear wash over me again. I stepped back, but Lisa stood her ground beside me. "We're not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice fierce. But the figure only laughed harder, its laughter reverberating through the empty space. "You've merely delayed the inevitable." I felt my resolve falter as it moved closer, its dark energy pulling at me. The memories flooded back, every moment of fear, every regret, every weakness I thought I had conquered. But then I remembered the shards, the light I had created by facing my fears. This time, I wouldn't run. I couldn't let it win. Together, I whispered to Lisa, squeezing her hand. "We can face it together." She nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Let's do this." As the figure advanced, the air felt thick with malice. Its eyes glinted with a predatory hunger, and I could almost feel the shadows creeping in around us, tightening like a noose. I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the wave of dread rising within me. "You're both so naive," the figure hissed, its voice a low growl that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think your bravery can save you? You think you can fight the darkness that dwells inside?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stand tall. "You don't define me. I've faced you before, and I won't back down again." The figure tilted its head, a twisted smile stretching across its face. You think this is a victory? You have merely scratched the surface of what I can do. Lisa squeezed my hand tighter, her presence grounding me. We won't let you control us, she shouted defiantly. You're just a reflection of his fears. As she spoke, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. I remembered the light from the mirror shard, the power of confronting my fears. Together, we could harness that strength. Your unity is your weakness, the figure taunted, stepping closer, its shadows swirling like smoke around it. I will tear you apart, piece by piece. But instead of fear, I felt a surge of determination. No, you won't, I said, stepping forward. You're not real. You're a construct of my mind, and I refuse to let you take control. The figure hesitated, its smile faltering for just a moment. I could see the flicker of uncertainty in its eyes. You think you've won? You think you've changed? It snarled, regaining its composure. You are still the same cowardly boy hiding from his past. Stop! I shouted, my voice echoing through the lobby. I am not a coward. I've learned to face my fears, to accept who I am. I'm no longer defined by you. I felt a rush of energy coursing through me, a warmth building from within. With a deep breath, I concentrated on that feeling, the light, the hope, the acceptance. I could feel Lisa's strength beside me, amplifying my resolve. Together, I shouted, raising our entwined hands. We are stronger than you. The light surged around us, illuminating the room, pushing back the shadows that surrounded the figure. For a moment, it faltered, its expression shifting from arrogance to anger. You will regret this, it shrieked, its voice high and frantic. You are nothing without me. We are everything together. I roared back, feeling the power of our unity radiate through the space. The light grew brighter, engulfing the figure. It recoiled, twisting in agony as the shadows that had once defined it began to dissolve. The echoes of its laughter turned into shrieks of despair, filling the lobby with a cacophony of sound. And then, in an instant, the shadows shattered like glass, scattering into the air like ash. I felt the weight of its darkness lift, leaving behind a profound silence. As the last remnants of the figure faded, I dropped to my knees, gasping for breath. The world felt different now, lighter, filled with a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced before. Lisa knelt beside me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did we do it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked around, feeling the remnants of the darkness dissolve into nothingness. I think we did, I replied, tears of relief spilling down my cheeks. But even as I spoke, a chill crept back into the room, a lingering shadow that felt too familiar. I glanced at the elevator, anxiety creeping into my chest once more. You think this is the end? A voice echoed from the shadows, the same deep, haunting tone that had filled the air before. I looked up, heart racing, as the figure began to reform from the darkness. This time, it appeared more monstrous, its form twisted and distorted, eyes glowing with a menacing light. You can't escape me, it thundered, a malicious grin spreading across its face. I am a part of you, and you will never be rid of me. Panic surged through me, but Lisa grabbed my arm, grounding me. No! This isn't what we fought for. We can't let it take control again. I nodded, remembering the power we had unleashed. Together, I said, my voice steady. We can face it again. The figure lunged, shadows swirling around us as it attempted to envelop us in its darkness. But I stood firm, raising the shard high above my head once more. You're not stronger than the light. As I swung the shard down, a burst of energy erupted from it, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows. The figure shrieked, a sound filled with rage and desperation. "You think this will save you? You are nothing without your fears." I clenched my teeth, focusing on the light radiating from the shard. "I am everything I choose to be," I shouted, my voice echoing with conviction. The light expanded, engulfing the figure in a blinding flash. I could feel the darkness pulling at me, trying to drag me into its depths, but I held firm, drawing on every ounce of strength I had. The shadows screamed, twisting and writhing as they were consumed by the light. I felt Lisa's presence beside me, her hand clasped tightly in mine, reminding me that we were in this together. With one final cry, the figure imploded in a burst of darkness, leaving behind a void that echoed with its last anguished shrieks. The air felt electric, the remnants of the battle dissolving into nothingness. As the light faded, I fell to my knees, gasping for breath. "Is it over?" I whispered, looking up at Lisa. She knelt beside me, her eyes shining with relief and disbelief. "I think so," she said softly, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. But even as I let out a sigh of relief, a nagging doubt tugged at my mind. Was this truly the end? I had faced my fears, but would they come back again? The silence hung heavy in the air, almost palpable. I took a moment to collect myself, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. But the fear remained, lurking in the shadows of my mind, reminding me that my battle was far from over. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked, concern etched on her face. "I think so," I replied, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. The weight of everything that had just happened began to settle back on my shoulders. We sat in the lobby for a while, catching our breath, allowing the stillness to envelop us. The air felt warmer, lighter, as if the oppressive darkness had been lifted. Yet, despite the victory we had just experienced, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. "Maybe we should get out of here," Lisa suggested, breaking the silence. "I don't like the idea of staying where that thing was." "Yeah, you're right," I agreed, pushing myself up from the floor. I felt a bit unsteady but determined to regain control. "Let's go outside, get some fresh air." We walked cautiously towards the entrance, the shattered pieces of the mirror glinting like fallen stars under the fluorescent lights. Each step felt like a reminder of the battle I had just fought. I wanted to leave that place behind, to forget the fear that had clung to me like a second skin. But as we stepped outside, the world felt different, hollow and echoing. The streetlights flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows that danced menacingly on the pavement. I shivered despite the warmth of the night. "This feels strange," Lisa said, glancing around. "It's like the darkness is still hanging around." "Yeah," I agreed, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. "But maybe it's just a residual effect of everything we went through." "Maybe," she replied, but her eyes betrayed her own fears. "What if it's not over? What if it's just lying in wait?" The thought made my heart race. I had fought so hard to banish the darkness, but now it felt as if it was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. "Let's go for a walk," I suggested, hoping to shake off the creeping dread. "Maybe being out in the open will help." Lisa nodded, and we started walking down the street, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. The night sky was clear, the stars twinkling above us like distant sentinels. But instead of comfort, their light felt distant, reminding me of how isolated I truly was. As we walked, I couldn't help but replay the events of the evening in my mind. Every moment of fear, every whisper of doubt. What if I couldn't face them again? What if the figure was right? What if I really was nothing without my fears? "Hey," Lisa said, breaking my thoughts. "You're quiet. What's going on in that head of yours?" I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't know if it's really over. What if that thing finds a way back?" "We faced it together," she reassured me. "And we can do it again if we have to. You're stronger than you think." "I hope so," I murmured, but uncertainty gnawed at me. We continued walking, the night air growing cooler. As we turned a corner, I spotted an old shop with a dusty window display. Something caught my eye, an antique mirror, its surface cracked and foggy. "Look at that," I said, pointing toward the shop. "What a creepy place." Lisa followed my gaze. "Yeah, it gives off a weird vibe." Before I could stop myself, I walked over to the window, peering into the depths of the mirror. My reflection stared back, but the shadows behind me seemed to swirl, almost alive. A flicker of movement caught my attention, and for a split second, I thought I saw the figure from the mirror, dark and looming, just behind me. I jumped back, heart racing. "Did you see that?" "What?" Lisa asked, stepping closer. "See what?" "The reflection," I exclaimed, breathless. There was something in it. "It's just an old mirror," she said, trying to reassure me. "You're just seeing things. We've been through a lot." "No, I'm serious," I insisted, feeling the fear bubbling up again. There was something there. She looked into the window, but there was only our reflection staring back, the shadows of the street behind us. "Maybe you're just tired," she said gently. "Let's keep moving. This place is giving me the creeps." I nodded, forcing myself to step away from the shop. But even as I turned, I could feel the cold grip of dread creeping back in. What if I was right? What if the figure was just waiting for me to let my guard down? We continued walking, but the unease clung to me like a fog. The streets felt increasingly unfamiliar, the shadows elongating around us as the night deepened. "I can't shake this feeling," I admitted, glancing at Lisa. "It's like the darkness is still watching." "Then we'll face it," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "Together. Just like we did before." Her words resonated within me, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the fear. As we walked, I drew strength from her presence, reminding myself that I was not alone in this fight. But just then, as we passed under a streetlight, a sudden chill ran down my spine. I looked up to find a shadow lurking just outside the light's reach, a figure standing still, watching us. "Lisa," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Do you see that?" She turned, her eyes widening as she spotted the figure. "We need to get out of here," she urged, grabbing my arm. But before we could react, the figure stepped forward, emerging from the darkness. My heart sank as I recognized the familiar twisted smile. "You thought you could escape?" it hissed, the voice like nails scraping across glass. "You are mine." I felt the ground shift beneath me, and panic surged through my veins. This wasn't over, far from it. "Run!" I shouted, pulling Lisa with me as we bolted down the street, the figure's laughter echoing behind us, a chilling reminder of the fear we had yet to conquer. We raced through the night, the darkness closing in around us as we ran. The figure's laughter pursued us, a haunting melody that echoed in the alleyways and danced through the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a desperate reminder of the danger lurking behind us. Where do we go? Lisa panted, glancing over her shoulder. The streetlights flickered, and I could see the shadows writhing, reaching for us like skeletal fingers. Anywhere but here, I shouted, adrenaline fueling my legs as we turned down a narrow side street. The familiar surroundings of our neighborhood felt foreign and menacing. We have to find a place to hide, Lisa urged, her voice a mix of fear and determination. There's an old warehouse not far from here, I replied, trying to recall the layout of the area. It's empty. We can get inside and regroup. We sprinted toward the warehouse, the weight of our fear pressing down on us. As we approached the building, I could see its outline in the dim light, a hulking structure, its windows shattered and its walls covered in peeling paint. Quick, over here, I said, leading Lisa around the side. We ducked behind a stack of old crates, catching our breath as we listened intently for any signs of the figure. The laughter faded, replaced by the sound of our heavy breathing. I leaned against the crates, my mind racing. What if it finds us? We can't let it intimidate us, Lisa replied, her voice steadier than I felt. We faced it before. We can do it again. But it was stronger this time, I argued, my voice low. It wasn't just a reflection, it felt real. We have to believe that we're stronger, she insisted, her determination radiating through the shadows. Fear only has power if we let it control us. I nodded, swallowing my doubt. Okay. Let's come up with a plan. We crouched together, our backs against the cold, rusted metal of the warehouse. What if we try to confront it again? I suggested. We have to show it that we're not afraid. But we need a strategy, Lisa said, her brow furrowing in concentration. If we just charge in again, it could easily overpower us. What if we can use the shard? I proposed, my voice barely above a whisper. It gave us strength before. Maybe it can do it again. Lisa's eyes brightened at the idea. Yes. If we can channel that energy, we might stand a chance against it. We'll need to draw it out first, I continued, feeling a sense of urgency wash over me. We need to catch it off guard. Let's find a way to lure it here, Lisa said, her expression determined. We can use the old tools and debris around us to create a distraction. We scoured the area, gathering anything we could find, old cans, broken bottles, anything that could make noise. My heart raced as I moved, the weight of our plan hanging heavily on my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still lurking out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Are you ready? I asked, looking at Lisa. She nodded, her resolve steadying my nerves. Let's do this, she replied, her voice fierce. We set up our makeshift trap, placing the noise-making objects in a line leading toward the entrance of the warehouse. Once we were in position, we took a deep breath, readying ourselves for what was to come. If it shows up, we'll spring the trap, I said. Then we can focus on using the shard to channel the light. Time stretched out as we waited, the tension hanging thick in the air. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears, each beat amplifying my anxiety. And then, just as I was beginning to doubt our plan, I heard it, the distant echo of laughter slicing through the silence. It's here, I whispered, my breath hitching in my throat. Lisa squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes wide with fear. Stay focused. We can do this. The figure emerged from the shadows, its presence almost suffocating. You think you can hide from me? It hissed, its voice dripping with malice. You are nothing without your fears. I felt the darkness close in, but I pushed back against it, reminding myself of Lisa's words. We are stronger than you. I shouted, trying to project my voice against the encroaching dread. Together, Lisa added, her voice steady and clear. The figure paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing its face. You think this will work? You are only delaying the inevitable. I felt the heat of anger rising within me, fueling my determination. No, we won't let you win. With that, we trigger our trap. The noise erupted around us, clattering and crashing, drawing the figure's attention. What is this? It roared, anger filling the air. Now! I shouted, and we both lunged for the shard, raising it high. A burst of light erupted from the shard, illuminating the warehouse and pushing back the shadows. The figure recoiled, its form distorting as the brightness surrounded it. You think this light can defeat me? It screeched, but its voice wavered, a hint of fear creeping in. We are not afraid, I declared, channeling every ounce of strength I could muster. The light surged, wrapping around the figure, tightening its hold. No! You will pay for this, it shrieked, thrashing against the light. Stay strong, Lisa urged, her voice piercing through the chaos. We have to finish this. As the light intensified, I felt the shadows pull at me, trying to drag me back into the darkness. But I stood firm, refusing to yield. You don't control me anymore, I shouted, the power of our unity surging through me. In one final push, the light exploded outward, consuming the figure entirely. It let out a horrendous scream, echoing through the warehouse, shaking the very foundations of our reality. And then, silence. I collapsed to the ground, panting, the shards slipping from my fingers. The air felt charged, almost electric, as I looked up to see the remnants of the figure dissolve into nothingness, the darkness lifting for the first time. Did we do it? Lisa asked, breathless, her eyes wide as she looked around. I think we did, I gasped, feeling the weight of our victory settle over us. But even as relief washed over me, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. But before I could voice my thoughts, the ground beneath us trembled slightly. I glanced at Lisa, panic rising again. What was that? I don't know, she replied, looking around. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the floor, spreading like a spider's web. From the fissure, dark tendrils began to rise, slithering like smoke. The shadows coiled around us, the familiar laughter creeping back into the air. No! I shouted, scrambling back, but the shadows quickly enveloped us, pulling us into their depths. Stay with me, Lisa screamed, grabbing my hand as we were swallowed by darkness. And just like that, the battle continued. As the shadows enveloped us, a cold panic surged through my veins. I felt as if I were drowning in darkness, the laughter of the figure echoing around us, growing louder and more taunting with each passing moment. Don't let go, I shouted, my grip tightening around Lisa's hand. The warmth of her skin was my only anchor in this overwhelming void. I won't, she gasped, her voice shaky but resolute. We were pulled deeper into the shadows, the ground beneath us shifting like sand. I couldn't see where we were going, but I could feel the familiar weight of fear closing in around us. My mind raced, trying to find a way to escape. We have to fight it, I yelled, struggling against the pull of the darkness. Use the shard. Channel the light again. I can't reach it, Lisa cried, her voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of laughter that surrounded us. "It's too far. Then we'll have to create our own light," I shouted back, the realization dawning on me. I closed my eyes, focusing on the warmth within me, the courage, the determination that had carried me this far. "Think of the light," I urged, my voice rising against the tide of darkness. "Think of the strength we have together." I felt Lisa's presence beside me, her energy intertwined with mine. "I'm with you," she breathed, and together we summoned the power of our shared experience, drawing it up from the depths of our fear. As if responding to our call, a faint glow began to emerge from within us, growing brighter with every ounce of courage we summoned. The shadows around us recoiled, the laughter faltering as the light pushed back against the encroaching darkness. "Yes. Keep going," I encouraged, feeling the energy surge between us. The light expanded, wrapping around us like a protective shield, illuminating the dark tendrils that threatened to consume us. I could feel the shadows retreating, their hold weakening as the light intensified. "We can do this," I shouted, my voice filled with newfound confidence. "We're stronger than you." With a final push, we released all the fear and doubt that had plagued us, channeling it into the light. The glow exploded outward, breaking through the suffocating darkness and illuminating the void around us. In that moment, the shadows shrieked, a haunting sound that echoed through the abyss. The laughter transformed into wails of despair, the tendrils twisting and writhing as they retreated further into the darkness. And then, just like that, the shadows began to dissolve, fading away like smoke in the wind. Light flooded the space, bright and warm, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "We did it!" Lisa exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. But before I could respond, the ground trembled violently beneath us. We were still suspended in the darkness, the remnants of the shadows clinging to the edges of our reality. "What's happening?" I yelled, panic creeping back into my voice. "Hold on," Lisa shouted, gripping my hand tighter as the ground cracked open beneath us. I glanced down and saw a swirling void, a deep chasm that threatened to swallow us whole. "We have to get out of here." With a surge of adrenaline, I pulled Lisa toward the edge of the fissure, scrambling to find solid ground. The light flickered, dimming as the shadows fought back one last time, desperate to reclaim their hold. "Come on," I urged, my heart racing as we teetered on the edge. "We can't let it win." Just as I thought all hope was lost, a beam of light shot down from above, piercing through the darkness. I shielded my eyes from the brightness, feeling its warmth wrap around us like a protective cocoon. "It's the shard," Lisa gasped, pointing toward the source of the light. The shard, glowing with an intense radiance, hovered above us, illuminating the chasm and pushing the shadows further away. "We need to reach it," I shouted, determination fueling my movements. I took a deep breath and, with one last burst of energy, leaped toward the light. "Jump!" Lisa yelled, following closely behind. We soared through the air, the warmth of the light enveloping us as we fell into its embrace. I felt the shadows releasing their grip, the weight of fear lifting as the light consumed us. In an instant, we landed safely on solid ground, the darkness dissolving around us, leaving only the glowing shard in its wake. Breathing heavily, we looked at each other, a mix of disbelief and joy in our eyes. "We did it," I whispered, a smile breaking across my face. Together, Lisa added, her smile infectious. But as we stood there, panting and exhilarated, I felt an unsettling sensation creeping back. The shadows had retreated, but a lingering doubt began to take root in my mind. Do you think it's really over? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For now, Lisa replied, her eyes scanning the surroundings. But we need to stay vigilant. It might try to come back. As I looked at the glowing shard, I felt a strange sense of responsibility wash over me. We need to protect this, I said, glancing back at her. It's our only defense. Agreed, she said, determination filling her voice. Let's keep it safe. We both knelt beside the shard, its light pulsing gently, casting warm shadows that danced around us. The warmth was reassuring, a reminder of the power we held together. What do we do next? Lisa asked, looking up at me with curious eyes. We keep moving, I said, standing tall. We find a way to make sure it can't come back. We face it head on, just like we did before. Together, she echoed, her smile brightening the dim space. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our victory settling in. The battle wasn't over, it had merely shifted. But as long as we faced it together, I believed we could conquer whatever lay ahead. With renewed determination, we stood up, ready to confront whatever awaited us. As we walked away from the shard, the air crackled with anticipation, and I knew deep down that the fight wasn't just against the darkness outside, it was also the darkness within. We would face it all, together. With every step away from the shard, the echoes of our victory resonated through me, but beneath the surface, the remnants of dread lingered like a shadow waiting to spring back to life. We moved cautiously, aware that the threat we had faced was not vanquished entirely. What if it tries to come back? Lisa asked, her voice laced with uncertainty as we stepped into the warehouse's dim light. We'll be ready, I replied, trying to mask my own fears with confidence. We have the shard now. We know what it's capable of. We examined the space around us, searching for anything that could be useful. The walls were lined with old crates and rusted machinery, remnants of a time long gone. In the far corner, I spotted a heavy door leading to what might be the main storage area. Let's check that out, I suggested, nodding toward the door. As we approached, I noticed that it was slightly ajar, creaking softly as if beckoning us inside. The shadows in the corners shifted, but I shook off the creeping fear and pushed the door open. Inside, the air felt colder, charged with an electric energy that sent shivers down my spine. We stepped into the room, the faint light from the shard illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. What is this place? Lisa whispered, her voice echoing softly. Looks like an old storage room, I replied, scanning the shelves. They were filled with dusty boxes and forgotten items, some of which looked strangely familiar. I stepped closer to a box marked with faded letters, fragile, handle with care. Curiosity piqued, I opened the box. Inside lay an assortment of old toys, faded dolls, broken action figures, and a small music box. I picked up the music box, its surface intricately carved but dulled with age. Do you think it belonged to someone? Lisa asked, stepping closer to inspect the contents. Maybe, I mused, feeling a strange connection to the toys. It's almost like they're remnants of a past life. As I turned the music box over in my hands, I suddenly felt a rush of emotions, nostalgia, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of memories clouding my mind. Let's keep looking, I said, placing the music box back in the box. There might be something useful here. We continued searching through the room, each item revealing echoes of the past. As we rifled through the dusty boxes, I could sense a lingering energy, a connection to the memories that had seeped into this place. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something moving. I turned sharply, heart racing, but found only shadows flickering in the corners. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice low, eyes darting around. "See what?" Lisa replied, her brow furrowed. "I didn't see anything." "I thought I saw something moving," I said, unease creeping back into my voice. "Maybe it's just our minds playing tricks on us," Lisa suggested, though her tone betrayed her own uncertainty. We resumed searching, but the feeling of being watched nagged at me, a constant reminder of the threat that had chased us here. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Then, as if summoned by my fears, a chilling breeze swept through the room. The shadows thickened, swirling around us as a familiar laughter echoed in the distance, reverberating through the very walls. "It's back!" I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. "We have to get to the shard." "But where is it?" Lisa cried, her eyes wide with fear. "I left it by the door," I exclaimed, rushing toward the exit, but as I turned, the room shifted. The door was gone, replaced by a wall of darkness that pulsated like a living entity. "What the?" I stammered, confusion setting in as the shadows closed in around us. "It's blocking us in," Lisa yelled, panic rising in her voice. I turned to face the encroaching darkness, feeling its weight pressing down on me. The laughter grew louder, a cacophony of voices merging into a haunting symphony that echoed my worst fears. "We can't let it trap us," I shouted, forcing myself to think clearly. "We need to find a way out." I scanned the room for an alternative escape route, my heart pounding. The shadows seemed to respond to my desperation, swirling closer, tightening their grip. "Look!" Lisa pointed toward a window at the far end of the room. It was small and barred, but it was our only chance. "We can climb out." "Let's go," I urged, and we sprinted toward the window, dodging the thick tendrils of shadow that snaked across the floor. We reached the window, but the bars looked unforgiving. "We need to break it," I said, searching for something to use. "This." Lisa grabbed a broken piece of wood from a nearby crate, and with all her strength, she swung it at the bars. The wood splintered, but the bars held firm. "Again," I urged, my heart racing as the shadows closed in behind us. Lisa swung again, this time harder. The wood cracked against the metal, and a glimmer of hope surged within me. "Keep going," I shouted, fear fueling our desperation. With one final strike, the bars snapped, falling away just enough for us to squeeze through. "I'll go first," I declared, pushing myself through the narrow space. "Hurry!" I tumbled to the ground outside, landing on the soft grass. I glanced back, reaching out for Lisa. "I'm coming," she called, wriggling through the opening. Just as she emerged, the shadows lunged at her, grasping for her ankle. "No!" I shouted, grabbing her hand and pulling her free. "Run!" Lisa screamed, and we took off, sprinting across the yard into the safety of the trees lining the warehouse. We didn't stop to catch our breath. We ran deeper into the woods, the darkness behind us swirling angrily but unable to follow us through the trees. "What now?" Lisa panted, glancing back at the shadows that lingered at the edge of the tree line. "We have to find a safe place to regroup," I replied, my mind racing. "We can't let it isolate us again." We pushed deeper into the woods, the moonlight filtering through the branches, illuminating our path. "Do you think we're safe here?" Lisa asked, looking around nervously. "For now," I said, but my heart felt heavy with doubt. But we need to keep moving. I don't want to be caught off guard again. We trudged through the underbrush, our breath heavy in the still night air. The shadows remained at the edge, lurking just out of sight, a reminder that our battle was far from over. "What do you think it wants?" Lisa asked, her voice a mix of fear and curiosity. "Power," I replied, recalling the figure's taunts. "It feeds on our fear. The more we run, the stronger it gets." "Then we need to stop running," she said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to confront it again." "But how?" I questioned, unsure of how we could face the figure after the chaos in the warehouse. "With the shard," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "We have to harness its light and use it to push back the darkness for good." The determination in her voice sparked a flicker of hope within me. "You're right. We need to go back and find it. If we can channel its power again, maybe we can banish the figure once and for all." "Then let's head back," she said, her resolve unwavering. As we turned to retrace our steps, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, an uneasy feeling, like a whisper in the wind, warning us that the shadows were closing in again. "Wait," I said, halting in my tracks. "Do you feel that?" Lisa nodded, her eyes wide with concern. The shadows began to shift, swirling around us as if they had a mind of their own, creeping ever closer. "We need to move," I urged, anxiety coursing through me. But before we could take another step, the figure materialized before us, its form darker than the night itself. "You thought you could escape?" it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed in my mind. "We're not afraid of you," I shouted, my voice steady even as my heart raced. "You should be," it taunted, the shadows writhing in response, curling around its form like tendrils of smoke. "You cannot escape your fate." "We'll see about that," I replied, drawing strength from the shard that lay hidden within me. "Together," Lisa whispered, her hand finding mine once more. With that, we stood resolute against the encroaching darkness, ready to face the nightmare that had haunted us for so long. The figure loomed before us, a mass of swirling shadows and chilling laughter, its eyes glinting with malice. "You are nothing but children playing in the dark," it sneered, the air growing colder as it advanced. "We're not afraid of you," I shouted again, trying to project confidence even as fear clawed at my insides. "Ah, but you should be," it replied, its voice slithering around us like fog. "Your fear feeds me, and it is so delicious." I could feel the shadows tightening around us, pulsing like a living thing. My mind raced. We needed to summon the light from the shard, but how? It felt like a part of me had been awakened by our earlier confrontation, yet it was still buried beneath layers of doubt and fear. "The shard!" Lisa exclaimed, her eyes brightening. "We need to channel it, together." "Together," I echoed, gripping her hand tightly, drawing strength from her unwavering resolve. We stepped closer, our backs pressed against one another as the figure loomed over us. "Do you think you can confront me with mere light?" it hissed, raising its hands, and the shadows responded, twisting and stretching as if eager to pounce. "You're wrong," Lisa shouted. "We've faced you before, and we survived. You don't own us." With that, I felt an unfamiliar warmth blossom within me, igniting a flicker of light that flickered at the edges of my consciousness. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memory of the shard's glow, the way it had pushed back the darkness in the warehouse. "We can do this," I said, the warmth spreading through my chest. "We just need to believe in it. Focus on the light," Lisa urged, her voice steady. Together, we concentrated, envisioning the shard, its light bright and unwavering. I could feel its energy pulling at the shadows around us, a warmth that felt powerful and alive. "Now!" I shouted, raising our joined hands toward the figure, feeling the energy pulsing like a heartbeat. The light exploded from our fingertips, a brilliant burst that illuminated the darkness, sending a wave of warmth cascading through the air. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they were pushed back, their forms writhing in anguish. "No!" the figure shrieked, its voice shrill and filled with rage. "You cannot defeat me. I am eternal." "You're wrong," Lisa shouted, her confidence fueling the light. "We are stronger than you think." The light grew brighter, swirling around us, wrapping us in its embrace. I could feel the darkness fading, retreating as we pushed forward. "We won't let you control us," I cried, channeling every ounce of strength into our combined light. The shadows writhed and twisted, their grip loosening, until finally they broke apart, scattering like smoke in the wind. "This isn't over," the figure screeched, but its voice was already fading, swallowed by the brilliance of the light. With a final surge, the light enveloped the figure, its form disintegrating into nothingness, leaving only silence in its wake. We stood together, breathing heavily as the warmth of the light receded, replaced by a profound sense of relief. "Did we do it?" Lisa whispered, glancing around as the shadows melted away, revealing the calm of the moonlit forest. "I think so," I replied, still trying to process what had just happened. We shared a look of disbelief, then burst into laughter, the tension releasing in a wave of relief. "We actually did it," Lisa exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. "I can't believe it," I admitted, still catching my breath. "But what if it comes back?" "We'll be ready," she assured me, squeezing my hand. "We've faced it once, we can do it again." The shadows had retreated, but a lingering unease remained. The thought that the figure might return weighed heavily in my mind, yet a part of me felt invigorated. We had taken a stand, faced our fears, and emerged victorious, together. "Let's head home," I suggested, glancing back toward the direction of the warehouse. "We need to regroup and figure out how to protect ourselves if it ever tries to come back." "Right," Lisa agreed, still glowing with triumph. "But first, let's check on the shard." We made our way back through the woods, the moonlight guiding our path. The air felt lighter, filled with an electric sense of possibility. The shard had become more than just an object, it was a symbol of our strength and resilience. As we neared the warehouse, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a weight hanging in the air that sent a chill down my spine. "Something feels off," I muttered, my instincts flaring. "I know," Lisa replied, her expression turning serious. "We should be careful." We stepped inside, and the moment we crossed the threshold, I froze. The shard lay on the ground, its glow dimmed, flickering as if struggling to maintain its light. "What happened?" I asked, rushing toward it. It was so bright before. As I reached down to pick it up, a surge of energy shot through me, and I felt a rush of memories flooding my mind, echoes of laughter, whispers of fear, moments of pain and joy. The shard pulsed in my hand, resonating with something deep within me. "It's responding to you," Lisa exclaimed, her eyes wide with awe. "I can feel it," I replied, my heart racing. "But it feels different." Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the warehouse, and the ground trembled beneath us. "What's happening?" Lisa shouted, her eyes darting around in panic. The shadows reappeared, swirling violently, but this time they were accompanied by a new presence, an overwhelming darkness that pressed on us from all sides. "No, not again," I gasped, clutching the shard tightly. "We have to use it," Lisa cried, her voice rising above the chaos. With no time to lose, I closed my eyes and focused on the shard, channeling my energy into it. I felt the warmth grow within me again, but this time it was different. It felt stronger, deeper, intertwined with my very essence. "Together," I shouted, and Lisa nodded, standing firm beside me. "Let's push it back." The darkness lunged at us, its tendrils reaching for our throats, but we raised the shard, letting the light burst forth in a radiant wave. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in terror as the light engulfed them. I could feel the very fabric of reality shifting, and for a brief moment, I was caught in the whirlwind of shadows and light. "Hold on," Lisa yelled, her voice barely cutting through the roar of chaos. "I'm trying," I gasped, forcing the light to grow brighter. The darkness writhed, and in a final desperate surge, I let go, releasing everything I had into the light. There was a blinding flash, a heartbeat of silence, and then a deafening silence enveloped us. I blinked, disoriented, as the light faded, leaving only the soft glow of the shard in my hand. "Lisa?" I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. Panic rose in my chest when I couldn't see her. "I'm here," she replied, her voice trembling as she stepped into view. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the fading light of the shard. "What just happened?" I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that lingered. "I don't know, but it felt like we almost crossed into something else, like the darkness was trying to consume us. We have to make sure that doesn't happen again," she said, her expression growing serious. "What if it tries to come back even stronger?" I nodded, looking down at the shard that still pulsed gently in my palm. It was different this time. I felt like it was connected to me, like it was part of me. "We need to learn more about it," Lisa suggested, glancing around the warehouse as if expecting the darkness to return. "Maybe there's something in here that can help us understand what we're dealing with." Together, we began to search through the remnants of the old warehouse, our hearts pounding with each creak of the floorboards beneath us. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and the air was thick with memories, each corner of the room whispering stories of the past. "Look over here," Lisa called out, her voice cutting through the quiet. She stood before a large, dusty tome that lay half-hidden under a fallen shelf. I rushed over, brushing off the dust and revealing the cover, a worn leather binding, its title embossed in faded gold letters, "The Secrets of the Shard, Light and Shadow." "This must be it," I exclaimed, flipping open the book to reveal pages filled with intricate illustrations and notes. It talks about the balance between light and dark. "Look, there's a section on harnessing the shard's power." Lisa leaned closer, her finger tracing the faded text. "What does it say?" "It says that the shard can amplify the light within, but it also warns of the consequences of imbalance. If the darkness isn't contained, it can feed on fear and grow stronger. So we have to keep the fear at bay," Lisa said thoughtfully. "But how?" I flipped through the pages, searching for anything that could help us. The book detailed various methods for channeling the shard's light, but it also warned of a ritual that could bind it to the user, a commitment that could either empower or doom them. "We might need to perform this binding ritual," I murmured, my heart racing at the thought. "It says it will strengthen the connection between me and the shard, allowing me to control the light better." "But what about the darkness?" Lisa asked, concern etched on her face. What if it tries to take advantage of that connection? It's a risk we have to take, I replied, feeling the weight of the decision. If we don't do this, the darkness could come back even stronger. We can't let that happen. Then let's do it, Lisa said resolutely, squeezing my hand. We'll face whatever comes next, together. We spent the next hour preparing for the ritual, gathering the necessary items mentioned in the book, candles, salt, and herbs that would enhance the binding. As I set everything up, the air felt charged with anticipation, a tension humming beneath the surface. Finally, we stood in a small circle created by the candles, the shard resting between us. The light flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Are you ready? Lisa asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. I am, I replied, taking a deep breath. No matter what happens, we will get through this. We began the ritual, reciting the words from the book. With each phrase, I felt the shard vibrating in response, the light growing brighter and more intense. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted restlessly, as if sensing the power we were summoning. Feel the light, I murmured, closing my eyes and focusing on the warmth radiating from the shard. Let it fill you. The moment the final words left my lips, a surge of energy coursed through me, connecting me to the shard in a way I had never experienced before. I could feel the light intertwining with my very essence, filling me with a sense of purpose and strength. But as the light intensified, the shadows roared in defiance. They surged forward, wrapping around us, threatening to snuff out the brightness we had summoned. No! I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. Stay back. We can't let it win. Lisa yelled, her voice cutting through the darkness. Channel the light. Focus on the shard. I urged, pushing against the shadows that threatened to overwhelm us. As we fought, I felt the connection to the shard deepen, its light flooding my veins like fire. The shadows recoiled, hissing and swirling, but I knew we had to maintain our focus. If we faltered, all would be lost. Together, I cried, and Lisa echoed my sentiment. We drew strength from each other, holding onto the light even as the shadows clawed at our resolve. In that moment, I realized that our bond was our greatest weapon. The darkness might be powerful, but it thrived on fear and isolation. We had faced it before, and we would do so again, together, united in our light. We are stronger than you, I declared, raising the shard high, its glow illuminating the entire warehouse. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of rage and despair, and I felt their grip falter. Keep pushing, Lisa urged, her face determined. With one final surge of energy, we unleashed the full power of the shard, and the light exploded outward, enveloping the darkness. The explosion of light was blinding, illuminating every corner of the warehouse, dispelling the shadows that had clung to us like a shroud. I felt the rush of energy engulf me, a warmth that penetrated my skin and filled my spirit with renewed hope. It's working, Lisa shouted, her eyes shining with exhilaration. Keep going, I urged, channeling every ounce of willpower I had left into the shard. The darkness roared in defiance, but it was retreating, shriveling away under the brilliance we had summoned. With each pulse of the light, I could sense the figure's anger, a cacophony of shrieks and howls that reverberated in my ears. You think you can banish me? It screeched, its voice a twisted echo. I will return, stronger than before. We won't let you. Lisa called back, her voice ringing with determination. You don't control us anymore. As the last remnants of the shadows fled into the corners of the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph washing over me. The warmth of the light wrapped around us like a protective cloak, a reminder that we were no longer alone in our fight. The figure's form flickered at the edge of my vision, but with every ounce of strength I had, I pushed forward, fueling the light with my fearlessness. "You are nothing but a figment of our imaginations," I shouted, my voice steady and resolute. "You think you know fear?" it hissed, the shadows swirling around it as if trying to regain their power. "I am fear. I am eternal. You cannot escape me." "You don't understand," I replied, taking a step forward. "We have faced you before, and we will do it again. Fear only has power over us if we let it." With one final surge, I pushed the light forward, feeling it merge with my own spirit, intertwining our essences. The air crackled with energy as the light exploded outward, engulfing the shadows and sending the figure into a chaotic spiral. "No! And no!" it screeched, the voice a mix of anger and desperation. "This isn't over." As the light swelled, I felt the figure's presence weaken, the shadows dispersing like smoke in the wind. "We are stronger than you could ever comprehend," I shouted, and with that declaration, the last of the darkness shattered into tiny fragments, dissolving into the air. Suddenly, an overwhelming silence filled the warehouse. The candles flickered gently, the last remnants of the shadows vanishing as though they had never existed. Did we do it?" Lisa asked breathlessly, her wide eyes searching the dimly lit space for any sign of the figure. "I think we did," I replied, my heart racing with the realization. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the exhilaration was tinged with a sense of foreboding. The figure may have been defeated, but its words echoed in my mind, a reminder that fear would always be lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to return. "What now?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky but filled with a sense of newfound strength. "Now," I said slowly, looking down at the shard in my hand, "we learn how to wield this power. We can't let fear control us again." I felt the shard pulsing gently, its warmth soothing against my palm. It had become more than just an object. It was now a part of me, a conduit of light that I had to understand fully. "Let's see what else this book has to say," I suggested, my mind already racing with possibilities. As we gathered around the tome once more, the air hummed with potential, filled with a palpable energy. I flipped through the pages, searching for anything that might help us understand the shard better. "Here!" I exclaimed, pointing to a section detailing the shard's properties. "It says that the shard can be used to protect against the darkness, but it requires a bond between its wielder and the light within." "A bond?" Lisa asked, tilting her head. "Yes," I replied, reading further. "It states that we must confront our own fears, acknowledge them, and then transform them into something powerful. Only then can we truly harness the shard's potential." "So we're going to have to face our fears again?" Lisa asked, a hint of apprehension in her voice. "Maybe," I said thoughtfully. "But this time, we'll be ready. We won't let fear isolate us. We'll confront it together." As I spoke, the shadows at the edges of the warehouse seemed to quiver, a reminder of the darkness we had just faced. I glanced toward the door, my heart racing. "We can't let our guard down," I cautioned. "We need to protect ourselves, especially if the figure decides to return." "Agreed," Lisa said, her expression turning serious once more. "But how do we do that?" "First, we have to strengthen our bond," I replied, looking back at the book. "We'll train together, learn how to wield the light within us, and discover how to use the shard to defend against whatever darkness may come." Lisa nodded, her resolve firm. "I'm in." Great, I said, feeling a surge of optimism. Let's start by gathering what we need. We can create a safe space to practice and confront our fears head-on. As we gathered supplies, I could feel the atmosphere shifting around us. The warehouse, once a place of dread, now felt charged with potential. The shard glowed softly, a beacon of hope amid the remnants of our struggle. And yet, even as we prepared, the haunting words of the figure echoed in my mind, "I will return, stronger than before." I knew we had to remain vigilant. The darkness might have been driven back for now, but I could not shake the feeling that it was merely waiting for the right moment to strike again. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Lisa as we finished gathering our materials. "More than ever," she replied, determination blazing in her eyes. "We've faced our fears and conquered them once. We can do it again." With a renewed sense of purpose, we stepped out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape as we stepped outside the warehouse. The cool night air filled my lungs, refreshing yet heavy with the remnants of our recent struggle. I glanced at Lisa, who walked beside me, her expression a mix of determination and apprehension. "We need to find a place where we can practice without distractions," I said, scanning the area for any potential locations. "Somewhere that feels safe, but allows us to confront our fears head-on." "What about that old park a few blocks away?" Lisa suggested, her eyes brightening at the thought. "It's usually quiet at night, and we could use the open space to focus." "Good idea," I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The park was familiar territory, a place filled with memories of laughter and joy, untouched by the darkness that now loomed over us. As we made our way toward the park, I felt a growing sense of purpose. We would not allow fear to rule our lives any longer. This time, we would take control and face the darkness together. Upon arriving, we found the park eerily quiet, the shadows stretching long beneath the moonlight. We walked along the winding path, the crunch of gravel underfoot breaking the silence. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets of the night. "This place feels different now," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's because we've changed," I replied, glancing around. "We're no longer the same people we were before the shard. We're stronger, more aware of what we're up against." We stopped near an old oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like arms welcoming us into their embrace. "This will be our spot," I declared, setting down the items we had gathered. "We can create our safe space here." Lisa nodded, her gaze focused. "What's the first step?" I opened the tome we had found, flipping through the pages until I found the section on confronting fear. "It says we need to define our fears clearly," I explained. "Only by acknowledging them can we begin to transform them into something powerful." "Okay," Lisa said, taking a deep breath. "Let's start with mine. I've always been afraid of the dark, of what might be lurking just out of sight." "That's a common fear," I said, understanding. "But let's dig deeper. Why does the dark frighten you?" "It's the unknown," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I feel so vulnerable, like anything could be waiting for me to let my guard down. And that vulnerability is what we need to confront," I replied, my heart pounding with anticipation. "We'll visualize that fear and transform it." "You're stronger than you know." "All right," Lisa said, closing her eyes. "I'm going to imagine my fear as a shadow, creeping closer, ready to engulf me." I joined her, focusing on the energy surrounding us. "Good. Now visualize yourself standing tall, unafraid. Feel the light within you pushing against that shadow. As we concentrated, I felt the air thrown with energy. Lisa's expression shifted, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I can see it," she said, her voice steady. "The shadow is dark and twisted, but I can feel the light pushing back." "That's it," I encouraged. "Channel that strength. Remember the light we summoned earlier, let it fill you and push the shadow away." With a deep breath, Lisa focused harder, and I could see a shimmer of light enveloping her. The shadow began to flicker and fade, struggling against the radiance she was summoning. "It's working," she gasped, a smile breaking across her face. "I can feel the light overpowering it." "Keep going," I urged, feeling exhilarated by her transformation. "You're stronger than the darkness. Embrace the light." With one final push, Lisa unleashed the light, and the shadow dissolved, leaving only a soft glow in its place. She opened her eyes, breathing heavily but filled with a sense of triumph. "I did it," she exclaimed, laughter bubbling up. "I actually did it." "You faced your fear and transformed it," I said, my heart swelling with pride. "Now, let's tackle mine." I took a moment to gather my thoughts, reflecting on the fear that had haunted me for so long. "My fear has always been about losing control," I admitted, my voice steady despite the weight of my confession. "It's the fear of what might happen if I can't hold it together, especially after everything we've experienced." "You've come so far," Lisa encouraged. "You're not the same person who first found the shard. You've already faced the darkness. Just remember that you're not alone." "I know," I replied, taking a deep breath. "But let's visualize it." With my eyes closed, I imagined my fear as a swirling storm, a chaotic force threatening to pull me under. I felt the weight of it, the suffocating pressure it created, but alongside it, I also felt the shard's warmth pulsing in my hand. "I see it," I murmured. "It's a storm, but I can see the light cutting through the chaos." "Visualize the light as a shield," Lisa urged, her voice soft and encouraging. "Let it protect you from the storm." I focused on the light, feeling its warmth surround me like a protective barrier. With each breath, I pushed against the storm, feeling its power weaken as the light grew stronger. "I am not afraid," I declared, feeling the surge of energy within me. "I can control this. I can face whatever comes." As I visualized the light pushing back the storm, I felt the chaos begin to dissipate. The storm weakened, unraveling until only a soft breeze remained, a reminder that I was in control. "You did it!" Lisa exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "You transformed your fear into strength." Opening my eyes, I felt a rush of adrenaline, my heart pounding in my chest. "We did it together," I corrected, smiling at her. "We're stronger now than we've ever been." With renewed confidence, we sat under the oak tree, the moonlight bathing us in a serene glow. The night was still, and I could feel the weight of our fears lifting, replaced by a sense of empowerment. "What's next?" Lisa asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Now we focus on harnessing this power," I replied, glancing at the shard still glowing softly in my hand. "We need to prepare ourselves for whatever comes next. The darkness may still return, and we must be ready." "Let's make a plan," Lisa suggested, her enthusiasm infectious. "We can create a training routine, practice channeling the light, and reinforce our bond." "Great idea," I agreed. "We'll dedicate time to this every night until we feel ready to face whatever darkness comes our way." We spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, our excitement propelling us forward. As we discussed strategies and practices, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental, a shift in our lives that would allow us to not only confront fear, but to conquer it. As the night deepened, the stars sparkled above us like distant beacons of hope. The park felt alive, imbued with the energy we had summoned together. Our plans unfolded like a road map, guiding us toward a future free from the shadows that had haunted us for so long. "Let's meet here every night," I proposed, glancing at the shard resting on the ground between us. "We can build on our progress, practicing and strengthening our bond with the light." "And we should document everything," Lisa suggested, her eyes bright with inspiration. "Let's keep a journal of our experiences, what we learn, how we feel, and any insights we gain. It'll help us track our growth." "That's a brilliant idea," I replied, feeling a sense of purpose swell within me. "It'll also remind us of how far we've come, especially on days when we feel doubt creeping in." We spent hours discussing our training routine, defining our goals and the fears we wanted to confront. It felt empowering to share our thoughts openly, the vulnerability we had experienced before now transforming into a collective strength. "And we should try different techniques to channel the light," Lisa added. "Meditation, visualization, maybe even creative expression like art or writing. We can explore all avenues." "Absolutely," I agreed. "The more we experiment, the more we'll learn about ourselves and the power we hold." As the moon dipped lower in the sky, we finally decided to call it a night, promising to meet again the following evening. The walk back home felt different, the shadows no longer looming ominously. Instead, they seemed to recede, giving way to the confidence that had blossomed within us. The next day was a blur of anticipation. I couldn't concentrate on anything but our plans for that night. As the sunset and dusk enveloped the town, I found myself pacing my room, excitement bubbling within me. I glanced at the shard resting on my desk, its warm glow a constant reminder of the power we now wielded. When evening finally arrived, I made my way to the park, eager to begin our training. Lisa was already there, sitting under the oak tree with her notebook in hand. The sight of her filled me with warmth. "Hey, you ready for tonight?" she asked, a smile brightening her face. "More than ever," I replied, settling down beside her. "I can't wait to get started." We opened our notebooks, jotting down our objectives for the evening. Our plan was simple: to practice channeling light through various techniques while documenting our experiences and feelings. "Let's start with meditation," I suggested, feeling the familiar tranquility of the park wash over us. Lisa nodded, and we settled into a comfortable position. I closed my eyes and focused on my breath, allowing the world around me to fade. I envisioned the light within me, the shard glowing brighter with each inhale, filling me with warmth and courage. "I'm ready," I whispered, feeling Lisa beside me, sharing in the moment. As we meditated, I felt a sense of connection deepen between us, a bond forged through our shared struggles and triumphs. The light pulsed gently within me, radiating warmth and reassurance, pushing back against any lingering fears. After several minutes, we opened our eyes, invigorated by the experience. "That felt incredible," Lisa said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. I could feel the light expanding within me, pushing the shadows away. "Same here," I agreed, my heart racing. "Now, let's try visualizing our fears again. This time, let's see if we can transform them into something tangible." We prepared ourselves for the exercise, taking a moment to gather our thoughts. I focused on my fear, picturing it as a chaotic whirlwind. With each breath, I drew on the light, envisioning it as a barrier against the storm. "I'm ready," I declared, and Lisa nodded in response. "Let's do this together," she said, her eyes steady with determination. We closed our eyes once more, channeling our energies and visualizing our fears. The storm began to swirl in my mind, fierce and unyielding, but as I channeled the light, I felt it pushing back, dispersing the chaos. "We're stronger than this," I whispered, feeling the power of our shared resolve. "We won't let it consume us." As we focused, I imagined the storm dissolving into a gentle rain, a cleansing force rather than a chaotic whirlwind. "I see it," Lisa said softly. "The fear is still there, but it's not as overwhelming. It's like we've tamed it." "Exactly," I replied, opening my eyes. "We're transforming it, taking its power away." We continued our practice, moving from meditation to visualization and even incorporating physical movement, allowing the energy of the light to flow through us. Each exercise strengthened our bond and honed our ability to channel the light, and with each passing moment, I felt our connection deepen. As the night wore on, we discussed our experiences and reflected on our progress. "I can't believe how far we've come in such a short time," Lisa remarked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "It feels like we're really changing." "We are," I agreed, feeling the warmth of the shard in my hand. "But we must remain vigilant. The darkness may not have vanished for good." "You're right," Lisa replied, her expression growing serious. "We need to stay focused and continue training. I won't let fear control me ever again." "Nor will I vowed, feeling a surge of determination. "Together, we can face whatever comes our way." As we prepared to leave the park, I glanced back at the oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. The night felt charged with potential, a promise of what we could achieve if we continued to face our fears. With newfound confidence, we stepped into the future, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. Little did we know, the true test was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the days turned into weeks, our training became a ritual, each night a new opportunity to confront our fears and strengthen the light within us. The bond between Lisa and me deepened as we shared our vulnerabilities and victories, learning to harness the energy of the shard with growing ease. One evening, while practicing in the park, we decided to incorporate some of the creative techniques we had discussed. "Let's try expressing our fears through art," I suggested, pulling out some sketching materials we had brought along. "I love that idea," Lisa exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Art can be such a powerful way to process emotions." We settled beneath the oak tree, the moonlight illuminating our makeshift workspace. I took a deep breath, allowing the night to inspire me as I began to sketch. I envisioned my fear as a looming storm cloud, dark and oppressive. As I drew, I focused on transforming it, envisioning the light breaking through the edges, illuminating the darkness. "What are you drawing?" Lisa asked, glancing at my sketch. "A storm," I replied, my pencil gliding across the paper. "But it's breaking apart, like I'm reclaiming my power from it." "That's beautiful," she said, her eyes shining with admiration. "I want to try something, too." She began to sketch as well, her pencil dancing across the page. I watched as her fear took shape, an eerie shadow, creeping and clawing at the edges of her paper. But just as I had done, she imagined the light breaking through, wrapping around the shadow like a protective cocoon. "I love how you captured the struggle," I said, genuinely impressed. "It really conveys the tension between fear and light." As we continued to draw, I felt a sense of release. Art became a therapeutic outlet for both of us, allowing us to externalize our fears and reframe our perspectives. Once we finished, we shared our sketches, discussing the emotions behind each stroke. This really helps, Lisa said, her eyes alight with understanding. I feel like I can face my fears head on when I see them on paper like this. Me too, I replied, feeling lighter. It's like we're taking control of the narrative. Encouraged by our progress, we decided to make art a regular part of our training. We began incorporating it into our routine, each session leading to new insights and revelations. However, as we trained, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to follow us like a shadow. At times, I would catch glimpses of movement in the periphery of my vision or hear distant whispers carried on the wind. Do you ever feel like we're being watched? I asked Lisa one night as we wrapped up our session. I have, actually, she admitted, her brow furrowing. It's almost like the darkness is aware of what we're doing and is trying to intervene. That's exactly what I feel, I replied, unease settling in my stomach. We need to remain vigilant and focused. We spent the next few nights intensifying our training, pushing ourselves to confront the shadows that lingered in our minds. Each session grew more intense, and with each challenge, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Then one evening, as we prepared to leave the park, we noticed something strange. The air felt thick, almost charged with an unseen energy, and the shadows around us seemed to shift and swirl, whispering secrets we couldn't understand. This doesn't feel right, I said, instinctively reaching for the shard. I feel it too, Lisa replied, her voice trembling slightly. It's like something is here with us. Just then, a chill swept through the park, and the shadows converged, coalescing into a dark figure just beyond the tree line. My heart raced as I took a step back, gripping the shard tightly. We need to stay together, I said, trying to steady my voice. The figure moved closer, its form shifting and distorting as if it were made of smoke. You think you can escape your fears? It hissed, the voice echoing eerily around us. I felt a surge of dread as the figure drew nearer, its presence pressing against us like a suffocating weight. Stay focused on the light, I shouted, remembering our training. We can do this. Lisa echoed, her determination shining through her fear. We raised the shard together, focusing on its glow as we faced the dark figure. The light pulsed in our hands, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. You have no power here, I declared, channeling every ounce of strength we had cultivated. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as the light surged around us. This is only the beginning, it shrieked, retreating back into the darkness. As the figure vanished, the oppressive weight lifted, leaving behind an unsettling silence. I glanced at Lisa, our hearts racing in unison. What was that? I gasped, still trembling. I think it was a manifestation of our fears, Lisa said, her voice shaky but resolute. We stirred something in the darkness by confronting it. Then we need to prepare even more, I replied, feeling a renewed sense of determination. We can't let it intimidate us. We've come too far. That night, we made a pact to double down on our training and harness the light within us. The encounter with the dark figure only fueled our resolve, and we began to incorporate strategies to confront these manifestations head-on. Over the next few nights, we faced our fears more openly, engaging in confrontations with the dark figure each time it returned. Each encounter taught us valuable lessons about our strength and the light we wielded. We're getting stronger, I noted one evening after we had successfully banished the dark figure once more. Every time, we're reclaiming more of our power. But we can't let our guard down, Lisa reminded me, her expression serious. It's not just about us anymore, it's about everyone who might face the same darkness. You're right, I agreed, feeling a sense of responsibility settle over me. We need to find a way to help others. We can't keep this to ourselves. We began brainstorming ideas for how we could share our experiences and empower others facing similar fears. Our nights of training transformed into planning sessions filled with excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. But even as we plotted our next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was lurking, waiting for its moment to strike. One fateful night, as we arrived at the park, the atmosphere felt different, almost electric. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, yet there was a tension in the air that sent a chill down my spine. "Do you feel that?" I asked, glancing at Lisa as we stepped onto the familiar path. "Yeah," she replied, her brow furrowing. "It's like something is about to happen." We made our way to our usual spot beneath the oak tree, but a sense of foreboding lingered. As we settled in, I pulled out the shard, its warmth reassuring against my palm. "Let's start with a meditation," I suggested, hoping to center ourselves before diving into more intense training. "Good idea," Lisa agreed, closing her eyes. We took a moment to breathe deeply, focusing on the light within us, letting it radiate outward. But as we meditated, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy, and the shadows began to stretch and swirl around us. I opened my eyes, heart racing, and glanced at Lisa. "This feels wrong," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Before she could respond, the dark figure emerged from the shadows, its form more solid than ever. It loomed before us, a twisted amalgamation of our fears, chaos incarnate. "You think you can defeat me?" it hissed, its voice echoing with malice. "We've faced you before," I shot back, clenching the shard tightly. "You don't scare us anymore." "But you're wrong," it sneered, advancing closer. "Your fear is your weakness, and I will consume you both." Lisa took a step forward, her determination unwavering. "We won't let you." We've grown stronger. As the figure lunged at us, we raised the shard, focusing on the light. It pulsed in our hands, illuminating the darkness surrounding us. Together, I shouted, and we channeled all our energy into the shard. The light burst forth like a beacon, pushing back against the shadows. The figure writhed, its form flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. "You cannot banish me," it shrieked, a hint of desperation in its voice. "I am a part of you. You cannot escape me." "We're not trying to escape," Lisa declared, her voice firm. "We're embracing the light and reclaiming our power." With a final surge of energy, we directed the light at the figure. The force struck it like a wave, illuminating the darkness and revealing the twisted remnants of our fears. "No!" it howled, its form collapsing in on itself, swallowed by the radiance we had summoned. As the light enveloped us, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation wash over me. The shadows retreated, dissipating into nothingness, leaving only a warm glow in their wake. We stood panting, hearts racing, the adrenaline coursing through us. The park felt alive with energy, the oppressive weight of fear lifted. "Did we do it?" Lisa breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I think we did," I replied, a grin breaking across my face. We faced it and emerged stronger. But even as we celebrated, a nagging doubt lingered at the back of my mind. I glanced at the shard, its glow flickering like a candle in the wind. "Do you think it's truly over?" I asked, my voice wavering. Lisa's expression turned serious. "I don't know. There's always a chance it could return." "Then we have to stay ready," I said, feeling a sense of urgency wash over me. We can't let our guard down. That night, we devised a plan to strengthen our bond and practice even more. We would not only train ourselves, but also seek out others who might be facing similar fears, sharing what we had learned. We can hold workshops, I suggested, excitement bubbling within me. Teach others how to harness their own light. That's a great idea, Lisa agreed, her eyes sparkling. We can create a community of support and empowerment. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to prepare. We reached out to friends and anyone in the community who might benefit from our experiences. As the days passed, we began to gather a small group of individuals who share our journey. Each session brought new stories, each person adding their unique fears and challenges to the collective experience. During one of our meetings, I noticed a newcomer, a woman named Sarah, who seemed particularly troubled. She sat quietly, her gaze distant and lost. "What's your fear?" I asked gently, wanting to encourage her to share. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the fear of being alone, of losing everything." My heart ached for her, as I knew the feeling all too well. "You're not alone anymore," I said firmly. "We're all here together, facing our fears as a community." Over the weeks, our group grew closer, each session reinforcing our collective strength. We practiced together, faced our fears, and learned to embrace the light. But just when we felt like we were making real progress, something shifted in the air again. One evening, as we wrapped up a particularly intense session, I noticed the shadows around us growing darker. "Is it just me, or is it getting colder?" I asked, glancing at Lisa. "No, I feel it too," she replied, her expression tense. "It's like something is coming." As if on cue, the dark figure reemerged from the depths of the shadows, its form more powerful and menacing than before. "You think you can escape me by hiding in numbers?" it sneered, its voice dripping with malice. My heart raced as I turned to our group, the fear etched across their faces. "Stay together," I shouted, raising the shard high. "We can face this," Lisa said, her voice steady. "We have each other." We formed a circle, holding hands and channeling the light through the shard. The glow intensified, pushing back against the darkness as we faced the figure. "You will not take us," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. The figure shrieked, its form flickering as it battled against the combined strength of our light. "This ends now," I shouted, and we focused all our energy into the shard, directing it at the dark figure. The light surged, and with a blinding flash, it struck the figure, engulfing it in a radiant wave. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing before collapsing in on themselves. As the last remnants of darkness faded away, the park fell silent, a sense of peace enveloping us. But as I looked around at our group, a chilling realization settled in. Though we had defeated the darkness once more, the shadows would always be waiting in the corners of our minds. In the aftermath of our confrontation with the dark figure, a fragile sense of hope hung in the air. Our group stood together, hearts still racing, but there was a renewed determination in our eyes. "We did it!" Lisa exclaimed, her voice breaking the silence as she looked around at our friends. "We faced it, and we're still here." I felt a rush of pride swell within me as I nodded. "Yes. Together, we're stronger than our fears." But deep down, a worry gnawed at me. Despite our victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was merely regrouping, waiting for the opportune moment to strike again. As the weeks turned into months, we continued to meet, sharing our experiences and strengthening our bond. We held workshops, reaching out to others in the community, and it felt like we were building a network of light to combat the shadows. Yet the darkness loomed ever closer, creeping into the corners of our minds. Some nights, I would wake in a cold sweat, the whispers of my fears echoing in the stillness of the night. "It's haunting me," I confessed to Lisa one evening as we wrapped up a session. "I can't help but feel it's not over." "I understand," she replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "But we can't let it control us. We've come too far." One night, while driving home from a meeting, the unease settled heavily in my chest. The streets were eerily quiet, shadows stretching long in the glow of the streetlights. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the dark figure looming behind me. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself, shaking my head to clear the thoughts. But as I pulled into my driveway, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I stepped out of the car, glancing around, the night air thick with tension. Inside the house, I locked the door behind me, heart still racing. "It's just your imagination," I told myself, trying to rationalize the fear that clung to me. But as I settled onto the couch, the shadows danced along the walls, twisting and warping in ways that felt all too familiar. My pulse quickened, and I felt the oppressive weight of dread pressing down on me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, making me jump to my feet. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered back, but the fear in my chest swelled. I crept cautiously toward the kitchen, every step echoing with the heartbeat in my ears. As I reached the doorway, the sight before me sent a chill through my bones. The kitchen window was shattered, shards of glass littering the floor. But more unnerving was the dark figure standing by the sink, its form solid and looming. "You thought you could hide?" it hissed, its voice low and menacing. I stumbled back, heart racing. "What do you want?" I shouted, gripping the shard in my pocket. "I want to remind you of your fears," it taunted, stepping closer. "You are not safe anywhere." In that moment, a surge of anger rose within me. "No!" I shouted, drawing the shard from my pocket. "You don't own me. You don't control my fear anymore." The figure paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its shadowy features. I raised the shard high, channeling the light through it. "You may haunt my thoughts, but I will not let you win." The light exploded from the shard, illuminating the kitchen in a brilliant glow. The dark figure recoiled, its form flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. "This is just a temporary defeat," it hissed, its voice filled with fury. "You cannot escape your true self." With that, it vanished into the shadows, leaving only the shattered glass and my racing heart behind. I stood there, breathing heavily, the light from the shard still glowing softly in my hand. I felt a mix of fear and relief wash over me. "I'm still here," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. But the confrontation left a deep scar on my psyche. I knew the darkness would return, and I had to prepare myself for the inevitable next encounter. The following days were spent in preparation. Lisa and I devised new strategies to confront our fears, incorporating the lessons learned from each encounter with the dark figure. "We need to be ready for anything," I said one night as we trained in the park. "It's only going to get stronger." "Then let's strengthen our resolve," Lisa replied, her eyes shining with determination. "We can't let it break us." We gathered our friends for an emergency meeting, sharing my recent experience. I could see the fear in their eyes, but we also sensed the resolve to fight back. "We have to stay united," I urged. "Together, we can confront the darkness and protect each other." As we trained and prepared, I felt the atmosphere around us shifting once more. The shadows thickened, swirling and coiling like tendrils, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the dark figure was waiting for us, plotting its next move. One evening, as we practiced under the watchful gaze of the moon, the shadows began to move with a life of their own, whispering and curling around us like serpents. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. "It's coming," I whispered, my heart racing. Lisa nodded, her expression serious. "We need to stay focused. Remember the light." But just as we prepared ourselves for another confrontation, the dark figure emerged once more, its form more powerful and formidable than ever. "You think you can escape me?" it roared, the ground trembling beneath its presence. "You are nothing without your fear." "We are not afraid," I shouted back, raising the shard high. "You will bow to me," it screeched, lunging forward. We formed a tight circle, each of us channeling our energy into the shard, the light glowing brighter as we united our strength. "Now!" I commanded, and we directed the light toward the figure. The clash of light and darkness created a shockwave that reverberated through the air, illuminating the night with an intense brilliance. But even as the light pushed against the dark figure, I could feel it slipping, as if the shadows were absorbing our energy. "We need to dig deeper," Lisa urged, panic creeping into her voice. "Focus," I shouted, feeling the warmth of the shard pulsing against my palm. "Channel everything you have into the light." As we focused, the light surged, illuminating the darkness around us. But the figure only laughed, its voice echoing with a sinister undertone. "You cannot defeat me, for I am a part of you," it shrieked, the shadows coiling tighter. "No!" I cried out, refusing to believe its words. "We are stronger than you. We will not let you win." With every ounce of strength we had, we directed the light at the figure, determined to banish it once and for all. The intensity of the light grew, blinding in its brilliance. The dark figure writhed, its form distorting as it fought against the power we wielded. "You will regret this," it howled, its voice filled with rage. But we pressed on, our hearts united in the fight against the darkness. With one final push, we unleashed the light, enveloping the figure in a radiant explosion. The force sent shockwaves through the air, and for a moment, everything fell silent. As the light faded, we stood in the aftermath, breathless and trembling. But the dark figure was gone, leaving only a lingering whisper in the wind, "This isn't over." The silence that followed our climactic confrontation hung heavily in the air, a fragile peace settling over the park. The glow from the shard dimmed, leaving only the soft light of the moon to illuminate our surroundings. "Did we really do it?" Lisa whispered, disbelief etched on her face. "I think so," I replied, scanning the area for any sign of the dark figure. But deep down, I felt the lingering chill of its presence, as if it had merely retreated to the shadows, biding its time. "We should head back," I suggested, my voice steady despite the unease simmering beneath the surface. As we began to gather our belongings, I caught sight of Sarah, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We faced our fears," I said, trying to reassure her. "But we need to stay vigilant. It may not be over yet." The rest of the group nodded, their expressions mirroring my concern. We all felt it, a sense of foreboding that hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury at any moment. Once we were back in the safety of my home, we gathered in the living room, the atmosphere tense and heavy. "What do we do now?" someone asked, breaking the silence. "We keep training," I said firmly. "We can't let our guard down." We have to be ready for its return. As the days turned into weeks, we committed ourselves to our training. We explored different techniques to harness our light, learning to confront our fears head-on. But no matter how much we practiced, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me like a shroud. The dark figure's words echoed in my mind, "This isn't over." One night, while reviewing my notes from our sessions, I stumbled across a page I had forgotten to read. It detailed a meditation technique that could enhance our connection to the light. "We should try this," I suggested to Lisa, who was sitting next to me. "It might help us strengthen our bond and prepare for what's coming." "Let's do it," she replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. That evening, we gathered our friends and introduced the meditation technique. As we settled into a circle, the energy in the room shifted, a palpable sense of connection enveloping us. We closed our eyes, breathing in unison, channeling our collective energy into the light. As we meditated, I felt the warmth spreading through my body, each heartbeat resonating with the rhythm of our unity. But just as I began to relax, the shadows flickered at the edges of my mind. I fought to push them away, focusing on the light and the warmth of my friends surrounding me. Suddenly, I was pulled into a vision, darkness swirling around me, shadows whispering my deepest fears. I struggled against the pull, reminding myself of the light and the strength we had found together. "You cannot escape," a voice echoed, sending chills down my spine. "We are stronger than you," I shouted back, my voice echoing through the darkness. In that moment, I realized that our fears only had power over us if we let them. I focused on the light, channeling every ounce of strength I had, and the darkness began to dissipate, retreating in the face of our collective resolve. I opened my eyes, heart pounding, to find my friends still meditating, their faces serene and focused. "We have to believe in ourselves," I whispered, feeling a surge of hope. "Together, we can conquer anything." As we continued our practice, I felt a growing sense of confidence. Each session brought us closer, reinforcing our connection to one another and the light we shared. But one evening, as we finished a particularly intense meditation, the air grew cold and heavy once more. I could feel it, a darkness creeping back, like a storm gathering on the horizon. "Stay alert," I warned, glancing around the room. "I can feel it coming." Just then, the shadows deepened, swirling around us like a living entity. The dark figure materialized once more, its form towering and menacing, a smile of malice stretching across its features. "Did you really think you could defeat me?" it hissed, the voice dripping with disdain. "I thrive on your fears. You are nothing without them. We are more than our fears." Lisa shouted, stepping forward with unwavering conviction. "You don't control us anymore," I added, raising the shard, the light pulsing in my hands. "You are foolish to believe you can resist," the figure screeched, lunging toward us. We quickly formed a circle, channeling our energy into the shard. The light intensified, illuminating the room in a brilliant glow. "We are united," I shouted, and we directed the light at the figure. The clash of light and darkness erupted around us, sending tremors through the air. I could feel the shadows pushing against us, but we held firm, our bond strengthening with each heartbeat. "You will not take us," Lisa declared, her voice filled with determination. As the light surged forward, the dark figure writhed in pain, its form flickering like a flame. "You cannot banish me," it howled, its voice filled with rage and desperation. "We can and we will," I shouted back, pouring every ounce of energy into the light. With one final surge, the light engulfed the figure, illuminating the darkness around us. "No!" it shrieked, its form collapsing under the weight of our combined strength. As the darkness dissipated, we stood together, breathless and trembling. The shadows receded, leaving only the warm glow of our light behind. But even as we celebrated our victory, the words echoed in my mind, "This isn't over." I looked around at my friends, their faces illuminated with a newfound strength. "We've faced it again," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "And we're still here. But we need to stay vigilant," Lisa warned. "The darkness may come back in another form." "Then we'll be ready," I replied, my voice steady. "Together, we can face anything." As days turned into weeks after our latest confrontation, a sense of calm settled over our group. We felt empowered, having faced the dark figure and emerged victorious. But that nagging feeling of uncertainty remained, a whisper in the back of my mind that we couldn't ignore. One night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The shadows seemed to creep closer, curling around my room like sinister tendrils. I rolled over, trying to dismiss my fears, but sleep eluded me. After tossing and turning for hours, I finally decided to get up and grab a glass of water. As I made my way to the kitchen, I felt an unsettling chill in the air. I paused, peering into the darkened corners of my home. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself, forcing my feet to move forward. But as I reached the kitchen, the feeling of being watched washed over me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the living room, sending my heart racing. I grabbed the nearest object, a frying pan, and crept toward the source of the noise. As I rounded the corner, I found the living room in disarray. The furniture was overturned, and the window was shattered, shards of glass littering the floor. And in the center of it all stood the dark figure, its form towering and menacing, eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You thought you could defeat me?" it hissed, a mocking smile twisting its features. "You are all so naive." "Not again," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "I will feast on your fears," it taunted, stepping closer. "You are nothing without them." "We are not afraid," I shouted, gripping the frying pan tightly. "We've faced you before." The figure paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its shadowy features. "You think you can resist me? You are weak without your fear." "We've learned to fight back," I replied, feeling a surge of determination. But even as I spoke, I could feel the darkness seeping into my mind, whispering my doubts and insecurities. The shadows danced around me, threatening to pull me into their depths. "No!" I cried out, shaking my head to clear the thoughts. "We are stronger together." I thought of my friends, of our shared experiences, and the bond we have forged. "We will not let you win." With a newfound resolve, I raised the frying pan, channeling my energy into it. The light within me flared brightly, illuminating the darkness that surrounded the figure. "You will not take us," I shouted, feeling the warmth of our unity flowing through me. The figure laughed, a low, sinister sound that echoed through the room. "You think you can banish me? I am a part of you." But I pushed back against the darkness, focusing on the light within. "You are not a part of me. You are a fear I will conquer." With a fierce determination, I swung the frying pan, and a burst of light erupted from it, illuminating the room in a brilliant glow. The figure recoiled, its form flickering and distorting as it struggled against the light. "You cannot defeat me," it howled, its voice filled with rage. "I will return. Then we will be ready," I shouted back, channeling all my energy into the light. The darkness writhed and twisted, but the light surged forward, enveloping the figure in a radiant explosion. As the darkness dissipated, I felt a weight lift from my chest, the oppressive fear lifting like a fog. But even as I celebrated our victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. In the following days, I shared my experience with my friends, and together we vowed to remain vigilant. We held more meetings, strengthening our bond and preparing ourselves for the next encounter. But one evening, as we sat in the living room discussing our training, the lights began to flicker. The shadows thickened, swirling around us like a storm. I glanced around at my friends, dread pooling in my stomach. "It's back," I whispered, fear gripping my heart. "Stay together," Lisa urged, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The dark figure materialized once more, its form more powerful than ever before. "Did you really think you could escape me?" it roared, the room trembling with its presence. "We are not afraid," we shouted in unison, standing our ground. The figure laughed, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the room. "You are all weak. You cannot resist me. Together, we are stronger," I countered, raising my hand to channel the light. The air crackled with energy as we formed a tight circle, our hearts united in the fight against the darkness. "Now!" I commanded, and we directed our collective energy toward the figure. The light surged forward, illuminating the darkness around us. But the figure pushed back, its form distorting as it absorbed our energy. "You cannot win," it screamed, the shadows twisting around us like chains. But we held firm, channeling every ounce of strength we had. "We will not back down," I shouted, pouring my energy into the light. With one final push, we unleashed the light, engulfing the figure in a radiant explosion. "No!" it howled, its form collapsing under the weight of our combined strength. As the darkness dissipated, we stood together, breathless and trembling. The shadows receded, leaving only the warm glow of our light behind. But the weight of its last words echoed in my mind, "This isn't over." I looked around at my friends, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "We've faced it again," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "And we're still here. But we need to stay vigilant," Lisa warned. "The darkness may come back in another form." "Then we'll be ready," I replied, my voice steady. "Together, we can face anything." As we continued our training, I felt the bond between us growing stronger, the light within us shining brighter. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that the true battle wasn't just against the dark figure, but against the fears that lurked within each of us. And as we prepared for the next encounter, I knew that our journey was far from over. The shadows would always be there, waiting for a moment of weakness to creep back in. Days passed, and the heaviness in the air grew more pronounced. Each of us was haunted by the specter of our fears, and despite our newfound strength, I could see the shadows creeping back into our lives. We were all living under the weight of the darkness, and no amount of light could fully erase it. One evening, as we sat in the living room discussing our next training session, I noticed Sarah staring blankly at the wall, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. She snapped out of her reverie, her eyes wide with fear. "I keep seeing it, the figure. It's like it's watching me. I can't shake the feeling, asterisk." "You're not alone," Lisa chimed in, her voice filled with empathy. "We've all felt its presence. But we have to confront it together." "I don't know if I can," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "What if it gets to me before I'm ready?" "Then we'll be there to fight it," I reassured her, my heart aching for her fear. "You're stronger than you think." We all are. But as the days went on, the feeling of dread continued to deepen. Each time we gathered for training, the shadows seemed to grow darker, creeping into our minds like a slow poison. It became clear to me that the darkness was not just a manifestation of our fears, but a living entity feeding off our anxiety and insecurities. One night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I made a decision. We needed to confront the dark figure head-on, not just in the light, but in the depths of our fear. The next day, I gathered the group in my living room, my heart pounding with anticipation. I had an idea. I began, looking at each of their faces. We need to go to the place where it all began, the park. We need to face the darkness where it's strongest. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Are you sure? Lisa finally asked, concern etched across her face. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. We need to confront it, not just with light, but with our fears. We can't let it control us anymore. Reluctantly, the group agreed. As the sun began to set, we made our way to the park, the shadows lengthening with each step. The atmosphere felt charged, the air thick with tension as we approached the clearing where we had faced the figure before. The moon cast an eerie glow, illuminating the ground littered with remnants of our previous battle. This is it, I whispered, my heart racing. We formed a circle, standing close together. I could feel the fear radiating from each of us, but I also sensed the light within us, flickering like a flame against the encroaching darkness. We're stronger together, I reminded them. Let's harness our fears and transform them into light. As we began to meditate, focusing our collective energy, the shadows around us deepened, swirling like a tempest. The dark figure materialized once more, its form more powerful and menacing than before. You think you can defeat me? It hissed, its voice echoing through the clearing. You are nothing without your fears. We are not afraid, we shouted in unison, channeling our energy into the light. You cannot escape your fears, the figure roared, lunging toward us. But we stood firm, drawing upon our shared strength. We will face you, I declared, and we directed the light toward the figure. The clash between light and darkness erupted around us, the force of our combined energy pushing back against the shadows. You think you can resist me? The figure howled, the shadows twisting around us like chains. But we held our ground, channeling every ounce of determination into the light. We are stronger than you, I shouted back. With one final surge, we unleashed the light, engulfing the figure in a brilliant explosion. No, it shrieked, its form collapsing under the weight of our unity. As the darkness dissipated, we felt the air grow lighter, the shadows retreating into the night. But in the back of my mind, the dark figure's voice echoed, "This isn't over." We stood together, breathless and trembling, but relieved to have faced the darkness once more. "We did it," Lisa said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We really did it. But we need to be ready for the next time," I reminded them, the weight of the darkness still lingering in my thoughts. As we left the park, I felt a shift within me. We had faced our fears together, but I knew that the battle against the darkness was ongoing. And as I looked back at the park, the shadows seemed to fade, but the darkness would always be lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment we would let our guard down. The days following our confrontation in the park felt surreal. While the shadows had receded, an undercurrent of tension remained. I could see it in my friend's eyes, a shared understanding that our battle with the darkness was far from over. As we returned to our daily routines, I often caught myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the figure to emerge from the shadows. The lingering feeling of dread settled in the pit of my stomach, a constant reminder of our unresolved struggle. One night, I was alone in my room, staring at the remnants of the broken mirror. Its jagged edges reflected distorted images of my surroundings, and I felt an urge to cover it, to hide it away like a forgotten nightmare. But part of me knew I couldn't escape the truth. It was a part of my journey, just like the darkness we were fighting. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on my door. It was Lisa, her face pale and anxious. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," I replied, sensing her unease. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I've been thinking a lot about the darkness," she began, wringing her hands. "What if it's not just an entity? What if it's something deeper, our fears manifesting into something real?" I nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "I think you might be right. It feeds off our fears, our insecurities. The more we let it in, the stronger it gets. But how do we stop it?" Lisa asked, her eyes filled with concern. "We have to confront our fears directly," I suggested. "We need to face them, not just in the light, but in the depths of our minds." "You mean like a mental journey?" she inquired, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "Exactly," I replied, my excitement growing. "If we can visualize our fears, we can face them together. We can't let them control us anymore." That night, we gathered our friends and shared our plan. They were hesitant at first, but as I spoke of the potential for healing, their resolve grew stronger. We decided to hold a meeting the following week, ready to dive into our subconscious fears and confront the darkness lurking within. On the night of our meeting, we prepared a safe space, creating a circle of candles in my living room. The warm glow filled the room, creating a comforting ambience against the cold shadows that threatened to seep in. "Tonight, we face our fears together," I declared, looking around at my friends. "Let's support one another and confront what lies within." As we settled into a meditative state, I felt the energy in the room shift. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and I closed my eyes, focusing on my breath. I imagined the darkness, the figure that haunted my dreams, and I felt a sense of determination rise within me. One by one, we shared our fears aloud, allowing them to take shape in the light of the candles. Each confession brought us closer, the shadows shrinking as we bared our vulnerabilities. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and began, "I fear that I am not strong enough to protect the people I love. I fear that the darkness will consume us, and I will be powerless to stop it." As the words left my lips, I felt a weight lift from my chest, the shadows retreating as if acknowledging my courage. When we had all shared, we joined hands, forming a united front against the darkness. "Together, we are stronger than our fears," I said, my voice steady. The shadows in the room began to flicker, twisting and curling around us like smoke. I could feel the air grow colder as the dark figure materialized once more, its eyes glowing with malice. "You think you can defeat me?" it hissed, its voice echoing through the room. "You are nothing without your fears." "We are not afraid," we shouted in unison, our voices blending into a powerful chorus. As we focused our energy, the candles flickered brightly, illuminating the room. I felt the warmth of my friend's hands in mine, grounding me as I faced the figure. "You are a part of us," I declared, my heart racing. "But you do not control us. We will not let you win." With that, we unleashed our combined energy, sending a wave of light toward the figure. The darkness writhed and twisted, but we pressed forward, channeling our fears into the light. "This ends now," I cried, pouring every ounce of strength into the light. As the light enveloped the figure, it screamed, a cacophony of rage and fear. "You cannot escape me," it howled, its form flickering as if it were being torn apart. But we held our ground, the light growing stronger, pushing the darkness back until it was nothing more than a whisper in the wind. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of release, a liberation from the weight of my fears. The figure dissolved, leaving behind a sense of calm and clarity. As the shadows receded, we stood together, breathless and trembling. "We did it!" Lisa exclaimed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We really did it." The weight of fear that had been suffocating us lifted, replaced by a newfound strength. We had confronted the darkness, not just as individuals, but as a united force. But even as we celebrated, a lingering thought nagged at me. The darkness may have retreated for now, but it would always be there, lurking just out of sight, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike again. "We need to remember this moment," I said, looking around at my friends. "We've proven that together, we can face anything." As we hugged and celebrated our victory, I knew that the journey was far from over. Life would always present us with new fears, but now we had the tools to face them together. In that moment, as I looked at my friends, I realized that the darkness could never fully consume us as long as we had each other. We would continue to shine our light, to face our fears head-on, and to emerge stronger from every battle. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that we could overcome anything that came our way. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.